the town doesn't have control over when the state chooses to change its regulations, so you can't necessarily rely that the state regulations will always be what they are. But that was it. I mean, I think it was left, it kind of looked at the bigger issues, which zoning districts, distances from certain uses, how many conditions you wanted to have on in the bylaw, and kind of left going provision by provision until you had the full board here. So I guess at some point, you know, Bill, when you feel like you're ready, you can just start at the top and go line by line.
Okay, all right. Before I do that, though, we're going to get some input from the police department tonight. Is that right? Glenn, do you have anything to add, or do you have any questions for us?
Well, I think it's been pretty well, speaking with the chief. I think our biggest concern is just that it stays in an isolated area. Our biggest concern with the industrial park would just be the school that's in there. We would sort of advise some sort of a setback or some sort of a distance away from the school zone. There's another like a collaborative situation up on Pond Park that does some treatment for elder care and also for special needs people up there. I think we just need to sort of, our concern is we probably feel it needs to be a distance away from them a little bit so that we wouldn't have any spillover into that area.
And the state law requires a 500-foot setback. Is that right, Susan, from any existing school?
Yeah, I have.
Shall not be located within 500 feet of any boundary of any residence, school district, playground, things along those lines. Correct?
Right.
All right.
So it says, in the absence of any town-imposed setbacks, these are the setbacks the state imposes.
Okay. All right. Are there any, to start out, are there any questions or comments from the board?
Well, I just compared what we had written with the state regs a little bit, and found a couple of, I just had a couple of questions, so I don't know if we want to just start going through, and I'll get to those when we get there.
All right, we can do that, yeah. All right, so I'll just go through the article as is. So the Article 1 asks, will the town amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Hingham adopted March 10, 1941 as heretofore amended as follows. Item 1, to be amended section 3-A to insert after subsection 4.25 a new subsection 4.26 registered marijuana dispensary, except for agricultural uses governed by section 2.1. Such use shall be followed by special permit A2 in the South Hingham Overlay District and prohibited in all other zoning districts. Item 2, by deleting section V-H, medical marijuana treatment centers in its entirety and replacing, therefore, the following. So V-H will read registered marijuana dispensaries, the purpose, to regulate the sitting, security, and operation of registered marijuana dispensaries subject to the applicable provisions of Chapter 369 of the Acts of 2012, an Act for the Humanitarian Medical Use of Marijuana, also known as the Act, and the regulations at 105 CMR 725, promulgated pursuant to the Act and applicable law. B, to minimize the adverse impacts of registered marijuana dispensaries on adjacent properties, residential neighborhoods, schools, and land uses potentially compatible with registered marijuana dispensaries.
Question I have on
Go ahead.
on B is the dispensary is proposed to be in the South Hingham Overlay District by special permit A2. What about the cultivating areas? Are there any restrictions on those, or is that something that under the agricultural provisions we can't regulate in other districts?
Right, so the way it works is, even though everyone thinks of the dispensary as the building where you go and purchase, the state defines a dispensary to include all aspects, including where the cultivation occurs. So, you know, in that sense, the permitted, you know, allowed with a special permit is proposed for South Hingham Overlay District. However, under the state law agricultural exemptions, if it meets certain acreage and other specifications under the state law, it could theoretically be allowed in any zoning district in the town, but it has to meet the state guidelines. So there's no way you can't restrict beyond what the state law allows.
I didn't follow that. So the cultivation can happen anywhere?
Right, so the other thing is the state does not require it all, both cultivation and dispensary and sale to be in the same location.
But an RMD, what we're calling RMD, registered marijuana dispensary, refers to the site of dispensing, cultivation, and preparation.
But it does not have to be all in the same.
Right.
This is why it's confusing. They have one definition that says dispensary, but the dispensary is not just the place of sale. It is also cultivation, all these things that they define. And the state has said they don't have to be, cultivation and sale does not have to happen on the same parcel.
Do you know if in the licenses that have been approved in the last 3 or 4 weeks, do you know what the precedent is on those in terms of where the cultivation is relative to the dispensing?
I have not looked at what the final approved locations are in the ones that just came out. But there are a number that, when proposed, were a different cultivation site from sale site.
So if somebody wanted to cultivate, if the people, I don't know, if somebody went into collaboration, I know that the ownership and the management is strictly controlled by the state regs and by ours. But say somebody went into collaboration with one of the nurseries in Hingham to cultivate on that nursery's property and have the dispensary in another location, they can just grow?
But maybe not, because under 40A Section 3, there's it's kind of, in the same section that you find the Dover Amendment, you find the agricultural protection, and there are restrictions that relate to acreage and those types of things. So if they fit in the protected use under state statute, the answer is yes. If they don't, no. Then the town can say, no, you can't have it there. But that's not something that the town has the ability to override.
Okay.
Do you think in the actual build-out or the actual administering of the licenses, that if Hingham did have a dispensary, would it have more than one, or would it only have one? The other towns, in terms of the precedent that I'm seeing, is there's really only one license
Well,
in a given town of the 50 licenses?
I mean, right now, I mean, I don't know what the State Department of Health is going to do over time. Right now, I think it's limited to 35 and at least one in every county. But I have no idea over time. And I think, I don't know whether, I know there was an application for one in Norwell. I don't know if it made the final cut. You know,
I don't think it does.
Right, so there's going to be an issue of proximity as well. I mean, there's two ways to look at it. If there is not a dispensary in a conveniently reachable location for someone who has a, license to use it, a patient, then that patient has the right to grow it themselves.
Right.
So the further away the dispensaries are from a patient, the more likely the patient is going to be growing it at home. So the question is, would you rather have one in your community so that it's centralized and the police know where it's all being grown? Or do you want to have 36 or more patients who are growing it in their backyard because they have a permit from the state and then the closest dispensary is too far away? So, there's competing interests as to whether or not you want one in your town or in your nearby community or not. So, it's kind of a weighing of interests there.
So it sounds like the setback is the best way to kind of manage it in terms of where it's located, and even if it's a lot of smaller dispensaries or growing areas, or even homegrown, maybe the more important thing is you keep it away from schools, keep it away from areas that would be at risk if they weren't a setback. Maybe that's the thing to focus on.
Yeah, and I think the thing you have to keep in mind for the homegrown, is if someone is permitted to do personal cultivation, it doesn't matter if they live right next door to the high school, they're allowed to do personal cultivation. So that's something that's beyond the town's regulation. Again, they have to do it in a locked, closed area. I mean, there's all these regulations on where they can grow it. They can't just have it like tomatoes in between their tomatoes in their backyard. But we're not focusing on the personal, because that's something that the state has taken out of the town's regulation, out of the town's control. It's just for the larger sale, point of sale, and larger cultivation locations.
If somebody owns a dispensary in one town, can they cultivate in another town if they own property in the other town?
It all has to be licensed by the state. So a few months ago, I actually spoke to someone on the Cape who was dealing with this because they had someone, it was going to be someone applying for a dispensary up here, in this, not in Hingham, but north of this side of the canal, but they were going to get into a partnership with a farmer on the Cape, and that would be the cultivation. So, if the state permits it, it can be in different communities.
All right, moving along here into definitions, we have under definition of registered marijuana dispensaries, RMD, also known as medical marijuana treatment centers, means a not-for-profit entity registered under 105 CMR 725.100 that acquires, cultivates, possesses, processes, including development of related products such as edible marijuana infused products, tinctures, aerosols, oils, or ointments, transfers, transports, sells, distributes, dispenses, or administers marijuana products containing marijuana-related supplies or educational materials to registered qualifying patients or their personal caregivers. Unless otherwise specified, RMD refers to the site of dispensing, cultivation, and preparation of marijuana. Any comments there?
That's the state definition.
That's a state definition.
That's out of the state
Yeah.
regs.
Moving to 3, exclusion of other marijuana establishment, any establishment that acquires, cultivates, possesses, processes including development of related products such as edible marijuana infused products, tinctures, aerosols, oils, or ointments, transfers, transports, sells, distributes, dispenses, or administers marijuana products containing marijuana or related activities shall not be permitted if such establishment has not been properly registered and licensed in accordance with the applicable law. Exclusion of accessory use under subparagraph 4. In no event shall the acquisition, cultivation, possession, processing, transference, transportation, sale, distribution, dispensing, or administration of marijuana products containing or derived from marijuana or related products be considered accessory to any other use, provided, however, that this provision shall not prohibit hardship cultivation to the extent permitted under and subject to the provisions of applicable law. Special permit requirements, subparagraph A, a special permit for a registered marijuana dispensary shall be limited to the uses permitted by applicable law and shall not be combined with other uses permitted or allowed under the zoning bylaw. Provided, however, that an RMD that is solely for the cultivation of marijuana and is protected under Chapter 40A, Section 3, should not require a special permit, but shall be subject to Section 3-B, 8 of the bylaw. So that's the Dover.
That's the agricultural.
Yeah, that's the Dover.
Yeah, that's the Dover Amendment. Subparagraph B, in addition to the application requirements set forth in this section, V-H, special permit application for medical marijuana facility shall include the following: the name and addresses of each owner of the facility, copies of all required licenses and permits issued to the applicant by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and any of its agencies and all applicable local agencies for the RMD.
Well, can I
Yep.
stop you there? So
Go ahead.
that was a suggestion that had come in, I think from
From the
Dr.
Board of Health,
Schultz
right?
over that's fine, except that, for example, I know one of his concerns are, does someone maybe need some kind of food service license if they're
Baking.
baking or whatever. It's possible that they may come and make sure they get a special permit. It's like like any restaurant. They may come and make sure they can get a special permit before they go to get the local one. So you're making this a requirement of their application that they already have other local permits, whereas in the regular course, if someone's doing food service, they'd make sure they had their special permit before they went and got their victualer's license. So I'm just wondering whether you're creating a submission requirement that someone couldn't fulfill. Does that make sense?
They've got to go through, they would have to go through the Board of Health anyway, right?
Right, but it would be making them go there first, because this is a submission requirement to get your special permit. So it would say you have to get your common victualer's license before you even have a place to, it would be like a restaurant going and get their license to serve food before they ever had their permit to open a restaurant. I just don't know that it's practical.
Can it be changed so that in order to operate, you provide all of that?
Yes, but that would go under general requirements and conditions. So if it got moved there, I think that would be a more appropriate location.
Okay, so
That makes sense.
it would go to 6A or 6B, go to 6, oh no, okay, we have other subparagraphs here, okay. Yeah, I would make a motion, we move it under general requirements and conditions, that makes the most sense. Would everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right, under subsection 3, trade name, logo, and building signage which complies with applicable provision of this bylaw and applicable law. 4, evidence of the applicant's right to use the site of the facility for the facility, such as a deed or lease. 5, if the applicant is a business organization, a statement under oath disclosing all of its owners, shareholders, partners, members, managers, directors, officers, or other similarly situated individuals and entities and their addresses.
So I have a question about that.
Go ahead.
Earlier in your reading tonight, we talked about nonprofits. The registered marijuana dispensary means a not-for-profit entity in the definition portion. So if the applicant is a business organization, does that preclude, is that in conflict with the
A
not?
nonprofit is a business organization.
Oh, it is,
Under
okay.
Massachusetts law, yeah.
It is a not-for-profit, is a business?
If it's incorporated or an LLC, yeah, it's incorporated under the Massachusetts Business Corporations Law.
So 501c3?
Mm-hmm.
So do you have to be a 501c3 to,
You have to be a nonprofit.
oh, not a charity? You
Right.
just have to be a not-for-profit? Okay, so those two are not in conflict with one another, okay?
Would you mention the not-for-profit, though? If
But-
the applicant, I mean, it assumes, but doesn't say it.
Well,
in definition.
they have to, in order to get there, so by the time they come to the town,
They
have a license from the state, and they don't get a license from the state until they've passed that. This is in order for the town to be aware of who are the people that we're dealing with, who are coming into our town. So that's what the purpose of this is, as opposed to making sure they meet the
What their
threshold. The
financial
state has
status
already
is.
made sure that they meet the threshold and has given them a license.
All right, continuing on, if any of the above are entities rather than persons, the applicant must disclose the identity of the owners of such entities until the disclosure contains the name of individuals. And 6, propose security measures for the medical marijuana facility, including lighting, fencing, gates and alarms, etc., to ensure the safety of persons and protect the premises from theft.
I mean, that's the type of thing that's also in the state, regulations. They require them to have certain types of alarms. They are required to have those. So the question is, from a special permit site plan review, do you want to have them showing everything that they have in place as part of the town's review?
Seems to be a safe way to proceed.
I guess it's also
I think
a
it's
question.
fine.
I don't know if yes, so Deputy Chief is saying yes.
We have the assent of the police department, that's good. All right, under subparagraph C, mandatory finding, the Board of Appeals shall not issue a special permit for a registered marijuana dispensary unless it finds the following. I, the applicant has satisfied all of the conditions and requirements of this section, V-H, and any other applicable provision of the zoning bylaw. And 2, the RMD demonstrates that it has
That's a typo.
yeah, the typo, it's got to say that it will meet,
Where's it?
let's take out
That it
has.
has,
So,
I think it must be will meet,
Will
because this
meet.
gets to the issue of what.
yeah, so let's
Yeah.
strike has from the draft. all right, that it will meet the permitting requirements of all other applicable state and local authorities related to the use and operation of an RMD. And 3, the RMD is designed to minimize any adverse visual or economic impacts on abutters or the surrounding neighborhood. Any comments there? Under 6, general requirements and conditions, in no event shall RMDs be considered to be or permitted as a retail, medical office, clinic, or consumer service establishment use, or any other use otherwise permitted under this zoning bylaw. RMDs shall not be permitted as part of a retail group or shopping center in the industrial district. Use variances shall be strictly prohibited. All right. And then B, in addition to the dimensional requirements set forth in section 4-A for the South Hingham Overlay District or the underlying zoning districts therein, RMDs or any part thereof shall not be located within 500 feet of the boundary of any resident zoning district, school, or outdoor playground or athletic fields, except when such uses are separated by Derby Street, Whiting Street, or Route 3. All right.
2 things about that, just quickly. Is it clear how this 500 feet is measured? In the state regs, they talk about from the corner of the building
Right.
itself, and so should we make that clear? Because it could be interpreted, I think, to be from the property line of one, of where this entity is. So I would propose that it be, from the corner of the structure that it's located in to the nearest one of these things.
Right, so the way it's worded in the regulation, so they're saying from the nearest point of the facility in question, so say you're talking about a school. So they're talking about the nearest point of the school to the nearest point of the proposed RMD. So say that the proposed RMD, it may not just be the building, right? It could be a cultivation area, it could be. So they're taking from the corner of the school to the
property line?
Well, yeah.
Or to what? The footprint
Right,
of
theirs
the-
isn't 100% clear either. So the question becomes.
What's the boundary?
I think it probably would be helpful. That's why this is kind of in italics, because it's really just to put it in there for discussion.
Well, let me ask this, Glenn, when you do a school zone case and you do the measurement with the wheel, what do you measure from, to what point? Do you do the bound property line?
They
or do
actually
the-
just recently changed it, but it's measured from the farthest boundary to the point of sale. So like at the high school, if you're looking at the high school property.
Yeah, you measure
You could
from
go all the
place
way down to the river and measure out from there,
to the farthest point of the boundary.
the farthest point of the boundary.
The other item I was thinking of adding to this is a religious institution. There's residence, school, and outdoor playground. I'm thinking of a institutional or a religious institution. Adding that to the list. I'm just thinking down the
Well,
road. I don't know if it's
let's-
precedent, but
Before we do that, let's just deal, how do we want to address the boundary issue? Do you want to say just to be clear, because that's a good point, then we'll talk about the school.
And Bill, related to that, one thing that the 3 board members that were here were talking about was kind of the indoor, outdoor situation. So say, for example, you have the ice rinks up there, but it's like people come, they park, they go in the building, they come out. So it's different from a school, maybe where you have a building, but then the children may be playing outside on a playground. So there was also the discussion among the 3 board members of that distinction. Do you remember talking about that? The skating rink, even, because you also have, there's the gymnastics school up there. But again, it's not something where there's potential outside interaction across.
it seems to me if there are outside uses, that wouldn't you go to the lot line?
Right.
I think that would be clearest, wouldn't it? If you just went lot line to lot line, then we won't have any argument about it.
And it's consistent with the boundary interpretation. 500 feet of the boundary of any residence, that almost implies lot line, rather than structure.
Makes sense to make the lot line. Do you think we need to add the words lot line, or is boundary sufficient?
Well, if you have a property, like Mary was just saying, like an office park, it might be one big lot that has 6 buildings on it that are very far apart. So where are you measuring, right? This came up with a veterinary clinic recently for the ZBA, where it was talking about setbacks. It really meant setback from uses on other parcels, but it was being interpreted as setbacks from any other use that was on the same parcel. So it was confusing. So,
I think it needs to be made clear that it's the boundary of the RMD use.
right.
Specifically, and then the boundary of those other areas.
So that could be
other
whatever
areas.
buildings are associated with the RMD, its parking lot, if it
Yeah,
has some
however, I
fenced-in
think-
cultivation, whatever is part of its operation.
The use
Yeah.
and the accessory
Yeah, the
construction.
active use of the RMD, you know, because, as you said, it could be part of a much bigger development, and then I think it's onerous.
Well, it says RMD or any part thereof right now shall not be located within 500 feet of the boundary of the zoning district, the school, the playground.
Yeah.
So,
I think
I think
that's,
That makes
covers it.
I think it's
right?
fine,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, I think that covers it. Gary had a suggestion about adding religious institutions. How do people feel about that?
I don't feel the need to,
Me neither.
but
I think what our concern is places, although maybe, it depends, you know, sometimes there's a school there. I think it's
Right.
places where parents drop their kids
Right,
off
right.
and they're out and about, and
That was why I was
I think about
suggesting it.
religious institutions as families going together, so it doesn't seem, it's like, then, well, kids go to malls and they hang out there, so we can't be between, you know, so kids hang out all over the town, so where do we kind of,
but
Well, I
if
think
it's,
that
but if
the-
it's a school, regardless,
Right.
right,
it's
whether it's a
protected.
church school
Right.
or.
So if it's, you know, if it's a church school, it's still protected because it's a school. So the question
Right.
is, if it's just a church that people go for services or activities and leave, that's the question you're being asked.
I guess where I was coming from is that the church is a center of where there are a lot of children typically. And so it seemed to me all these uses, school, outdoor playground, athletic fields, were directed as uses where there would be a concentration of children. So I just thought it might be good to mention that, or include that, just further clarification. Just covers us down the road. You know, you don't know what the precedents will be, and this goes in, and then things will apply, or organizations will apply.
I'm okay with this covering it, but let's just vote on it. Who would like to add the religious institute exception to this provision? Gary?
I would.
Walter?
Yeah.
Okay, 2. Anybody else?
No.
No, I'm comfortable with it as it is, but I think it was a good recommendation. All right, C is hours of operation shall be set by...
wait, just one more
Yeah,
thing on
go
that.
ahead.
So, I just want to make it clear, in case there's any people living in that neighborhood up here, that the real difference here about this 500 feet is that last phrase that says, except such when, I think the word such has to come out, except when such uses are separated by Derby Street, Whiting Street, or Route 3. Now, we did that because Route 3 divides a residential district from part of the South Shore Industrial, from part of from the overlay district, but Route 3 clearly can't be crossed by any children, so it didn't make sense to have that additional setback from Route 3. The portion of Derby Street that's on the overlay district also is extremely busy road, where I think that there is kind of possibility of crossing is on Whiting Street, but we really thought Whiting Street was such a busy road that it kind of fell into the same category, so that if there were a facility across Derby Street from the residential side of Derby Street, that adding the extra 500 feet would not be significant. So I just want to make sure, I don't know if there's any neighbors here, but I just want to make sure that the people who live in that area kind of agree with that interpretation.
Bill, I just have one question. That 500 feet, would that apply to the residential zone, residential districts in Weymouth as well?
Yes, any residential district.
Okay, it doesn't end with the town line or anything like that.
Right, because,
That's a good
and
question.
that's a good question, because Rockland and Weymouth have residential areas that are,
If you go up the end of the industrial
Right.
park,
Yep.
right,
it's surrounded by Weymouth.
right, so it's 500 feet from those. And we did not include those dividing roads in this.
All right, C, the hours of operation will be set by the, shall be set by the Board of Appeals. D, special permits shall remain exclusively with the original applicant to whom it is issued, who shall be the owner or leasee of the land and/or building described in the application. The special permit shall automatically terminate on the date of the date the applicant transfers or conveys, other than the granting of a mortgage to an institutional lender, its title or leasehold interest, as applicable, and the land or the building where the RMD is located. A special permit may be transferred only when, with the approval of the Board of Appeals, by major modification to the special permit, with all information required in this section V-H. E, no smoking, burning, or consumption of any product containing marijuana or marijuana-related products shall be permitted on the premises of an RMD.
So this is where we come up against the state regs in two different locations. Do you have the packet that Mary gave us? On page 22 of the state rules, it's a section called operational requirements for RMDs. And it says every RMD shall have detailed written operating procedures, and operating procedures shall include but need not be limited to the following. And if you go to number 7, it says plans for quality control, including product testing for contaminants and compliance with this. So I don't know if product testing includes burning materials. I don't know, that's a
Okay,
question.
that's actually good.
But under 10, it does say that it's an alcohol, smoke, and drug-free workplace policies. So I think that the state regs kind of cover the consumption of anything, on that site by anybody there. And then the second place in the state regs that I found something that was sort of conflicting is on page 35. It's a section called prohibitions, and number 8 of the prohibitions says, this is what I'm going to say is prohibited. Consumption of marijuana on the premises or grounds of any RMD is prohibited, provided, however, that a RMD may administer marijuana for the purposes of teaching use of vaporizers or demonstration of use of other products as necessary. So I think what we're writing goes in conflict with that
Right, so
particularly.
there's two ways you can approach it. You can take the provision out altogether and just rely on what the regulations say, or you can say, except to the extent permitted by applicable law, you can't do this. And then that way, to the extent it's permitted under regulations, they're protected. So the question is, do you feel the need to have it in there at all because it's governed by regulations? Or, so you could just delete it, or add in, except as permitted
I would
by
move-
applicable law?
I'd move to strike it. I think the regulations speak to it. What does everybody else feel?
I agree.
The only reason that might be helpful to keep it is that it makes it clear, certainly at town meeting, it makes it clear what our, what our attitude about it is, whereas it's hard to make the state regulations clear. So that might be the only reason to just add the except as permitted by applicable law.
I think it would go a long way to sort of assuring people that this is not kind of a hookah lounge,
Yeah.
lounge or whatever that is, that it's not a place where people can go to
Hang out.
hang out.
It's not a den,
Yeah.
like, so that people, in case
I'd
people
agree
are
with
having
Sarah.
very
I think I
negative
like that.
impressions.
All right, we get 3. So we want to add except as
Permitted by applicable law, is that right, Susan?
permitted by applicable law. Okay, we'll add that. All right, moving on to F, RMD shall provide the Hingham Police Department Building Commissioner and the Board of Appeals with the names, phone numbers, and email addresses of all management staff and key holders to to whom one can provide notice if there are operating problems associated with the RMD. G, as a condition of its special permit, the holder shall file an annual report to the Board of Appeals no later than January 31st, providing a copy of all current applicable state licenses for the RMD and its owners, and demonstrate continued compliance with the conditions of the special permit. H, any special permit issued under this section V-H shall lapse if not exercised within 1 year of issuance. And I, immediately upon the earlier of the expiration, surrender, or revocation of any state-issued licenses or registration, or the ceasing of operations at the RMD, all plants, marijuana-infused products, or other marijuana products of any kind shall be destroyed or removed from the property.
So, Bill, question on the insertion that Dr. Schultz had recommended, that was going to be relocated. You have as a, special permit finding that the RMD will demonstrate that it will meet the permitting requirements, or you were talking about possibly just inserting it under 6. So, I mean, it could get put in, inserted after hours of operation, or wherever you feel it would be appropriate.
So would it go in as a separate line item under 6? Or would it be inserted into one of the other paragraphs?
I mean, I would give it its own letter,
Okay.
but maybe put it in after C and make it D, and then re-letter appropriately, just saying that, general requirements and conditions that, that it shall be a condition of the special permit, or it has down here on G, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at what makes sense. G has as a condition of the special permit. It could also go down in there as a condition of the special permit, they shall, obtain all necessary local permits and provide copies to the zoning board of appeals or something like that.
That's part of G even, because I think what we're saying is
Oh, yeah, copy of all state licenses, so it could be local.
at permitting,
Right.
before
Right.
beginning operations, and then subsequently every January 31st. I mean, because that's what we're asking them for, right?
Right.
So we could just add it to G.
Okay, so you want to add language for the local permits as well. Add local permits.
All right. Any questions or comments from the board before I open up the public? Would anybody from the audience like to ask a question or make any comments? And what I'm going to have you do is go up to the microphone. We are on television, so if you could just go over to the microphone, identify yourself and address for the record, and feel free to ask. So, Glenn, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. You're up.
Glenn Olson from the Police Department, Hingham Police Department, resident of Hingham. The only question, is this limited to inside sales? Is that in the state regulations?
What do you mean?
That all sales would have to take place within the building?
You afraid they'll have a cart?
Well, they might have a yard sale, or 50% sale or something, I don't know. I mean, does it limit it to?
Good question.
I would imagine the state regs cover that, but
I would think
I would think
it would be all indoors,
I
yeah.
would think the regs would require that all sales be indoor.
Because if not, I'm thinking maybe that's something we might want to insert.
Inside a building is distinguished from inside a car.
So why don't we
Yeah.
do this? Why don't we ask, if it's not,
I just thought of that, I'm sorry, I just
Well,
why
sitting here talking.
Why don't what we could do is, in the provision where it says, where we're talking about E, where you can't do anything shall be permitted, you could add in there at the beginning saying all sales must be, or distribution, it's really, or sales or distribution, I'll look at the sales and or distribution, must be inside. I gotta come up with better language, I'm doing this on the fly. And then you say, and except as permitted, it can't be consumed on the premises. So you can fold it into E if you think that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that works. You can put it in E.
Trying to look at the definitions.
Definitions just define the R&D, we can talk about sales.
No, because it deals with cultivation too, right? So you're really pretty limited to the indoors, but limited access area deals with a building room or other indoor-outdoor area. Or RMD where marijuana is cultivated, stored away,
Right, because it could be cultivated indoor or outdoor.
right?
So. Hardship.
So we'll just add it, we can add it to E.
You want to add it to E?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody okay with that?
Sounds good.
All right, thank you for that. Anybody else from the audience like to ask a question or make any comment about our advisory liaisons? That's okay? Okay.
Susan, I feel like we caught a lot of the potential typos, but I feel like maybe we should just whip it over to Tom O'Donnell's house, because I feel like no matter how much we feel like it's ready to go, Tom always seemed to catch one.
We need to make the revisions, obviously, that we, the board talked about tonight. So once those get run through, then, you can vote it subject to proofreading and everything else before it gets sent over to advisory, and then you're gonna have potentially 15 different people on advisory reading it and
Right.
catching.
He
But
still
that doesn't
seemed
mean
to-
we still sometimes miss things.
He still seemed to catch something as he was proofreading it, it seemed to me, always.
Yeah.
But it looked good, so, we'll see.
All right, the subject to the revisions that have been proposed this evening, I'd make a motion that we act favorably on the proposed draft of zoning Article 2, herein named registered marijuana dispensaries. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Article 3 is to conform affordable housing provisions to LIP requirements. So I know we've got a draft here, so I'll go through this. I just wanted to ask Susan, is the discussion, is that the proposed, so is that in addition to, under the draft we have before us?
And you're moving fast. Here we go. Okay, so in the packet, it just has handwritten markups on it. This is just my handwritten markup from the meeting, the last board meeting with the 3 members. So the article is the top half of the page, item 1 and item 2. That's the proposed warrant article. So just did we talk about this one time? We talked about this one time, right? And then the second time we talked about it, there were just the 3 members. So this is the 3rd time, right? So we did kind of talk about it preliminary first. So just because I had gotten some questions kind of here and there, just bumping into people, et cetera, on what the scope of this is. And so I think it's helpful if you look at the original language, it's in the bylaw, and if you just look at 4D and 5E, it's very similar, it's just changed contextually. In 5E, 4D was adopted in 2001, is a flexible residential development. And then the addition of the affordable housing provisions to multifamily housing happened in 2005, and it was really just a cut and paste of the language and making contextual changes. So 4D was the original language from 2001. It's on page 57 of your zoning bylaw. And so what it says is, it shall be a condition of the approval of a definitive plan, a definitive subdivision plan, that the procedure for the sale or rental of the lower moderate income housing shall be in writing and approved by the Hingham Housing Authority or such other board or authority granted jurisdiction over affordable housing units by the town prior to the issuance of a building permit for a site. So what does it mean? It means at the time when this was adopted in 2001, and I was on the board at the time, and Sarah, you were, but I think Sarah and I are the only ones who were here in 2001. But I think Jim was maybe, Jim, were you on the housing partnership or on the housing authority? So I gave some bullet points to the board, to Mary, to give out to the board, because I went back to try to recreate how this bylaw came together in 2001. And there were two separate bylaw provisions in 2000. There was an inclusionary bylaw and there was a cluster bylaw. The cluster bylaw didn't have any affordable housing component to it. The inclusionary was the kind of affordable housing incentive bylaw. There were two projects in front of the town that year in 2000. One was Canterbury Village, down off Canterbury Street, and the other one was Black Rock. At the time, there used to be in the inclusionary zoning options. You didn't have to build, you got a density bonus, but you didn't have to build the affordable unit. You could make a payment to the town. So Canterbury Village came in, they were building those very high-scale homes, but they also then had, that were kind of going to be clustered, kind of. But then they had a separate lot that had frontage on, I think, Canterbury Street, that was going to be right next door to an existing home. And so the planning board looked at it and said, oh, that's great, you can put the affordable home right there. And the developer said, oh, no, we don't want that option, we want to just give money to the town. So there was a disagreement at the time between the planning board and the ZBA as to, well, how do you even calculate what the sum should be? These are going to be $1 million+ houses. How do you calculate? I can't remember now, but the number came out at $275,000, which the planning board felt was really not a significant amount of money. And at the time, even though there was the housing partnership and there was the housing authority, there weren't a lot of housing creation initiatives going on. So the board's like, the money's going to sit there, is it going to be used? So between that and kind of not being overly happy with how Black Rock turned out, the board said, let's propose a new zoning article that will cover both. And that's where flexible residential development came from. I don't remember at the time that we really talked a lot about what the state regulations were. The inclusionary bylaw had talked about, oh, you file copies with everybody and his brother to review, including all the affordable housing groups in town at the time. So I'm not sure how the provision ended up there unless it was part of discussion and back and forth and keeping the housing authority or other affordable housing groups kind of involved in the process. So I'm making that assumption even though I was there. I don't remember, Sarah, if you have any better recollection than I do, but I read through all the minutes and it wasn't too detailed on that point. You know, there was, the housing authority and housing partnership at the time did not want to get rid of the inclusionary bylaw, so there was a lot of discussion both in the hearings and in town meeting about why are we even doing this. But in the end, town meeting approved it, so this is what we have. But what this does is it says the Hingham Housing Authority or such other board with jurisdiction over affordable housing units will approve the procedure for the sale of rental housing. But what's come out of it is in connection with trying to deal with the, person who owns an affordable unit at Ridgewood Crossing who probably shouldn't own it, DHCD started kind of digging back and looking at everything. And they said, this doesn't make sense because we get the final say on these units, which are called units only approval. So it's a special permit, and you just end up with 1 or 2 or 3, whatever the density bonus is. You end up with a couple of units, and you do this units only application. And if they approve it, then you get to count them on your inventory.
They're only DHCD can be that monitoring agent.
Well, only DHCD, you have the procedure for the sale or rental. It has to be what DHCD says. So they're saying, that's fine, you know what I mean? You guys can say whatever you want, but if your housing authority or any other board or authority approves something we don't approve, we're throwing it out and you're not getting them counted. So it became more of a streamlining issue of, at the time in 2001, because of the interaction of the boards, I think the desire was, let's keep everybody involved in the process as much as possible. But DHCD is saying you're adding another layer that if we don't like it, we're just gonna throw it out anyway, or we're not gonna count your units, so why do you have this in there?
Well, I was thinking that, let's say we look at this in the context of two things. One, the FRD, when adopted, had a requirement that the procedure be monitored by the Hingham Housing.
No, not
Authority.
monitored, just that the procedure.
Sale or rental.
Just the procedure be approved.
Okay. So what we had here is we had involvement by the Hingham Housing Authority in the sale or rental of the affordable
No,
units.
okay, so this is where it's getting confused. This zoning provision doesn't give the housing authority or any other board monitoring approval. In fact, the town has no right to dictate to a developer who the monitoring agent is, who the lottery agent is. We can't do it. In fact, there's case law on it. All this said is they're gonna have a plan for selling or renting these units, a procedure, and the housing authority is gonna review the procedure and approve it. It doesn't give any body, and I don't mean individual, any entity, monitoring authority or anything else. It's all you're doing is here's my plan for renting these units. Are you approving it or not approving, or do you approve of it? That's all the provision provides for. So that's where it comes down to DHCD says it doesn't matter what anybody in the town of Hingham says. If it's not the procedure we approve, we're either gonna throw it away or not count your units. So they said it's a layer in there that can only lead to complications that doesn't facilitate these units being put on your inventory. And so their recommendation, I mean, obviously they can't tell us what to put in our zoning. Their recommendation was it adds a layer that can only complicate the procedure, the getting the units counted, not facilitate getting them counted.
So, can you give me an example of a procedure that has been approved by, have we had any procedures approved in this, under this
Ridgewood
section
Crossing.
of the bylaw?
Ridgewood
Only that one?
Well, I don't know what happened, but in the end, Back River technically has the same provision under the multifamily housing, but it never went through the housing authority. They went through the regular LIP process. They've got their own lottery agent. DHCD was monitoring agent, and for whatever reason, the ZBA never enforced this provision. So even though there was under 4E multifamily housing, when Back River was approved, this provision was in there, it was never followed, and it was never enforced.
And does DHCD, so Gary was asking about the monitoring, so this is about the procedure.
Right.
Where is the regulation that talks about the monitoring?
That's all at
Who
the state,
has-
that's all at the state level.
That's all DHC.
That's all DHCD.
No matter what we
No
say.
matter-
Right, and the only, so for a LIP project, so this is different than if someone comes in a comprehensive permit like SEB or the one, Lincoln Street or whatever, the one,
Lincoln Apartments.
Adams Court, I'm thinking, or whatever. That was a straight 40B. In that case, there's different forms, and there is a third-party monitoring agent, and there's a third-party lottery agent. Under these types of projects, which come in through a special permit at the local level, it's DHCD's forms, DHCD approves them, DHCD has to personally approve every buyer. The only third party is a lottery agent. DHCD doesn't do the lotteries.
So we have
So-
a situation where, on the CPC, in trying to comply with providing more affordable housing as one of the 4 major categories of
Right.
CPC funding, the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust has come in with an initiative to basically do a local initiative, not capitalized, not the DHCD
Right.
interpretation of local initiative. But this is a proactive way of creating affordable housing in the town that would meet the percentages relative to what DHCD is talking about in terms of the parameters to be counted on the affordable housing inventory, meet those parameters. But the initiative is local and the initiative is proactive. What I'm trying to get a handle on here is that everything I'm reading is that the DHCD is imposing all of the state regulations, which is fundamentally saying that the only way we can do affordable housing in this town is, and have it comply with the state, is to have it be a 40B process, which is a hostile process. It's not necessarily...
I think you're misunderstanding. So
Okay.
you have what I'll call the straight 40Bs, which is like the SEB application up on Main Street.
Right.
The town of Hingham can create all the affordable housing it wants all day long. The question is, do you want the units counted on the subsidized housing inventory, right? We can do as much initiative as we want and make as many units affordable and give the whatever initiatives the
And never
trust wants
talk
to
to
do.
the state.
And never talk to the state.
Right.
But if we
Right.
wanted to count on our inventory, on their inventory, which is what gets us to our 10%, we have to do their rules. That's like,
But
that's the way it works.
The thing that's confusing there is that the boards have basically stated that with Linden Ponds, we meet that percentage requirement per the inventory requirements. So my understanding was the town's position is that we've met it. So what we're doing with these other initiatives is a more proactive way of addressing the issue of affordability. Because based on that construct that we've met it. Now, if one works on the basis that we haven't met it, then this makes some sense.
Well,
But
okay.
That's what I
I
might
get
be
where you're
confused there.
going.
Yeah.
But at
okay.
this point, we can say, as a town, and we do, that we are at 10%. DHCD has control of the inventory. The inventory does not say that Hingham's at 10%. Either the town is going to concede, or at some point in time, a judge will decide. But as a matter of state law, no matter what we say, we don't comply because DHCD doesn't agree and we don't have a judge who said we are. So it doesn't, I would suggest that it doesn't make sense that we turn away the ability to get units counted because every unit that counts helps. And the other thing to remember is even if we got to 10% tomorrow, if another 10 units got built, we're now down, we're only at 9.9%, we still need one more unit to get there. So even once you hit 10%, if more housing units are created, you could slip below 10% and have to climb back up there. So any opportunity, especially with town initiatives to keep our 10% number intact or add to it incrementally probably makes sense.
I think it would be ill-advised to just bail on the state's count. I mean, no matter what our position is, we should probably have that process going on, right? And get whatever affordable housing we're building counted by the state. I mean, it doesn't seem like an onerous process, particularly because it's the applicant who has to.
No, well, so what
Right.
happens...
we're going to
right.
get more, this is going to help us get more units counted.
Right, so what happens is, once the permit's issued, then they're required to cooperate, so they have to provide, whatever, get their they have to have their lottery plan and all this information that they'd be required to provide to the town. And then under the state regs, the Board of Selectmen have to submit the application with all this backup material. So the cooperation requirement is that the developer provide the town with all of the exhibits that the Board of Selectmen need so that they can submit the application up to DHCD. If DHCD likes it, they approve it, then they say these are the forms you have to use, the regulatory agreement and the deed rider that you have to use.
So if you did that, Susan, and you said, okay, you had the ability to say to someone, okay, we meet the parameters, so we think it's reasonable that those units are counted. Why is the local initiative program struck from this? Why wouldn't we still proceed with that? Because that's a friendly 40B.
It is, but we're not necessarily striking that program. What DHCD's comment to me was, First of all, names of programs may change, or the local initiative program could, like, next year be some different kind of program. And you also have the opportunity, for example, you're talking about, possibly the housing trust or whoever does it, coming up with, even if it's one house at a time, if you're going to submit the unit, it may not, there's something called a units only application, which is slightly different from a friendly 40B or a special permit. Like, there might be a unit that's created in the town, let's say Habitat for Humanity. Then we're applying to just have this one unit counted, but it's not technically local initiative program. So, because it's not under a special permit issued by the Board of Appeals. So that's why they're saying if you just made it generic, in conformance with any of the regulations issued by DHCD that gets us on the inventory, and don't limit it to this one identified program. So it actually makes it broader by taking the words out, and make sure that we're covered regardless of what DHCD calls their program at any given time. They just said, why don't you make it broader rather than narrower? So that was
Yeah,
a
I guess
suggestion.
what I had interpreted here was that if you add in, another option, which would be the local initiative program, not delete it, at least then you've got a more proactive, more friendly way of doing it. I guess what I interpreted with striking
We're not
it
getting rid of it.
is that it would be more restrictive.
No, it's
40B
actually
restrictive,
and you gotta remember,
Yeah.
this provision only appears in 2 sections of the zoning bylaw. So this provision only applies if you're doing an FRD under 4D or multifamily housing under 4E. That's the only time where this provision, otherwise, everything's always just gonna get
And it
triggered
only
independently.
talks about the procedure.
Right,
Okay.
for approving the procedure for sale and rental.
So it doesn't, and I think by not including the words out lip, you are making the umbrella bigger to include anything we might be doing that we want to get
Right.
the state.
I'll give you a
to count.
parallel. In certain circumstances, like the boards, whether it's a planning board, ZBA, might issue a permit with a condition that says, oh, and before you get a building permit or a C of O, the town engineer has to sign off on it. I got a call from the town administrator that says, my town engineer is really busy. Why are these boards giving them more work without asking me whether I wanted to do it? And so this is now, and maybe the housing authority is happy to do it, but they're not getting hired to do anything here. There's now asking the housing authority to review and approve something. There's no ability under here to require the developer to pay anybody for their review. You know what I mean? You're now creating a step. And if the housing authority just said, we're busy, we're not even going to bother reviewing it, then where's the applicant?
But they in turn would have to go to the state anyway. So this is just
Right.
saying that the applicant has to get the DHCD.
We just want them counted.
Yeah.
If you're going to get this density bonus,
Yeah.
and we're going to get the affordable units, you got to make sure that it's done in a way that we get credit for it.
All right, well, let's go ahead. I think we got a good census here of what we're talking about. So the article is to conform affordable housing provision to LIP requirements. Article to be numbered later, I guess. Will the town amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Hingham adopted March 10th, 1941 as heretofore amended as follows. Item 1, amend section IV-D, period 7, period I, by deleting the first sentence thereof and substituting there for the following. All right, so the proposed change, it shall be a condition of the approval of a definitive plan that prior to the issuance of a building permit for the site, the procedure for the sale or rental of the low or moderate income housing dwelling unit shall be in conformance with regulations promulgated by the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development for inclusion of such units on Hingham subsidized housing inventory. All right. And then item 2 is amend section IV-E, period 5, period small e, by deleting the first sentence thereof and substituting therefore the following. Shall be conditional of the approval of a special permit that prior to the issuance of a building permit for the site, the procedure for the sale or rental of the lower moderate income housing dwelling unit shall be in conformance with regulation promulgated by the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development for local initiative.
No, for
taking that out.
inclusion,
For
yeah.
inclusion on Hingham subsidized housing inventory. Okay. Any further discussion? Anybody from the audience like to make a comment or ask a question about this article? Jim, go ahead.
John Watson, 291 Rockland Street. Susan, I'm just, even though we talked about it, I'm still unclear. Does the present language say that we, the authority, must review and approve, or may? Because in practice, we haven't very often, if ever.
No, well, it puts the burden on the developer that the housing authority shall approve, that they have to put it in writing, and it has to be approved by the housing authority before they can get a building permit.
Yeah, so that is odd, because we haven't, that I can think
Well,
of.
there's only been two of these. Ridgewood Crossing and Back River, and the first one, housing authority was involved, and the second one,
Oh, it hasn't been in-
somehow it got over, nobody paid attention to it, it didn't get enforced by the ZBA.
So it was, it's funny, so it was a mandated action that has never happened.
Right, and now it's all, they're down, DHCD just approved the sale of the last unit at Back River.
Because we might conceivably have some ideas about a better way to market or monitor, it, but we haven't actually had a case where we wanted to change
Well,
anything.
the only one, well, like I said, Ridgewood Crossing, which didn't, had some issues in how it was administered, and then Back River, in which it just was, it appears that no one focused on it, and clearly it was never
So everything,
followed.
Brewer Meadows and everything else preceded this then?
Those were, which one are you talking about?
Brewer Meadows or Whiting Lane or?
No, well, that was but that was before that. That was
That's what I'm saying, they
before
preceded
one.
this.
That was before this, yeah.
I think we left out, but we didn't know there was a party.
Anyone else? All right, then I would I would make a motion, we act favorably on Article 3 to conform affordable housing provisions to LIP requirements. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Article 4 is in reference to body art.
Now, are we paying attention to the time, though?
Yeah.
Do we worry about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so body art article, and I guess the proposal is whether or not we want to modify the zones this article is applicable to as necessary. I guess, did everybody get the recommendation of town meeting 2001, Article 31? It was in the packet.
Yep.
All right, anybody have any questions? All right, so I guess we could leave it as it is, or we could amend it to restrict it just to being in compliance with the adult use provision of the zoning bylaw. So as it is now, it's in, they're allowed in with a special permit in industrial and limited industrial park zones, all right? So we could keep it that way, or we could propose an amendment, an article that would restrict them to simply adult use areas. Would you agree with that, Susan?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of whether you want to keep it in the district it is or switch it to a different district.
Anybody have any comments on?
Well, I think at our last meeting, when we talked about this, we have three different zones, and you all know, in Hingham that have the word industrial in it. We have industrial, industrial park, and limited industrial park. The way our bylaw is written right now, body art is allowed in industrial and limited industrial park. So industrial is where the Hingham shipyard is, and limited industrial park is where, the Stop and Shop is. Yeah, so that's where body art is allowed right now. The entire shipyard, kind of.
Some of Beale Street.
Stop and Shop, Beale Street to Faulkner Road. Yeah, so kind of from that, coming over the bridge, and everything north of Beale Street to the water, all the way up to Faulkner Road, is where it is allowed. What we just talked about for the medical marijuana uses, we're talking about the South Hingham Overlay District, which is an area called Industrial Park. And that body art is not allowed up there. The adult uses, so there was this other activity called adult uses.
I think this was, do we think this was a typo, Susan?
I think it was meant to be
What year was this?
industrial.
Yeah.
We were both
That
here.
was a busy year in 2001. We were doing FRDs.
I remember discussing
I think we
it.
spent too much time on FRDs and not enough
I
time.
remember
on-
discussing it on Beale
Adult
Street.
uses are in industrial park, which is the one of the three called industrial that body art is not allowed.
Right, which makes no sense.
Does not make sense. And when we just talked about the medical marijuanas, we're talking about industrial park. We're not talking about the other two industrial words either. So it seems like body art is kind of flipped into those other two industrial zones and not into the one where we have adult uses and medical marijuana.
I mean, I think it should be in the industrial park. I mean, it doesn't make nearly as much sense to have it be in the shipyard and on Beale Street, allowed there as it would be allowed in the industrial park.
I would agree. It doesn't seem to fit in the shipyard as we now know the shipyard has become, so.
It may be a typo in the book. I mean, if you look at, Mary was just pointing out, if you look at the town meeting warrant article from 2001, the recommended motion is to allow it only in industrial and limited industrial park. No. No, so it should, but
No,
it should
that's
be
where it is.
industrial
That's where it
park
is.
and limited industrial park.
Why limited industrial park?
Let's see, where is,
Limited industrial park is
oh,
where the
no, that's
Stop
the
and
one
Shop
next,
is.
no, right, so that is the mistake. Those are the two it's in now. And you're talking about putting it in an industrial park, in the one in the middle. Yes, okay.
Personally, I would leave it where it is and then just add that third, but we had that conversation at our last meeting, and Walter and Sarah felt that it should not be
Next to the Stop and Shop?
at the Stop and Shop in the
In the
shipyard.
shipyard.
You know, I think body art is kind of mainstream now, so I would leave it there and add the
Hopefully not for
industrial
long.
park, but I'm totally willing to go with what everybody else thinks.
The intent of the 2001 town meeting was to have it in all three, or just
No.
in two?
No, in the industrial and the limited industrial park is what it was called out in the,
So if we left the interpretation as it was in 2001, is it in the area where the adult uses are? or
No,
not?
no, this
It's not.
puts it, the way it is now is like the shipyard and Beale Street Stop and Shop area.
But I remember the conversation, and I remember us talking about the fact that it didn't make sense. So I do think something went wrong in the transfer from the discussion to the town meeting, and we did have a lot of articles that year, so I don't understand what quite went wrong, but I remember talking about it making sense up in the industrial park.
Yeah, it makes sense.
if the board wanted to permit it in the industrial park, we need to
Okay.
modify the article. If you wanted to strike it from the industrial zone, which is the shipyard area, or the limited industrial park, we would need to do that as well. Our bylaw has a Scrivener's error where it doesn't show that it's permitted in the limited industrial park, so that is a typo in the bylaw, but technically the warrant says it was. So we need clarity from the board on all three of those zones, whether it's in or out, if that's possible.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't know, what does the board want to do, and then I can suggest the language, depending on what the board wants to
I
do.
think I'm kind of persuaded by Sarah and Walter's approach to it, so I think I'd probably not want it in the shipyard.
Limited, so you would not want it in limited industrial park? Yeah, so we only, so the consensus of the board is we only want it in the industrial park, is that correct?
That is correct.
I think so, yeah.
Anybody from the audience like to ask a question, make any comment? Jim, go ahead.
We seem to have a habit of trying to hide things we're embarrassed by, which might be legitimate businesses, increasingly mainstream. My daughter 10 years ago got a butterfly in one of her 2 earlobes. I'm not sure where she got it. But seriously, this is a personal service, like nail shops and hairdressers and various folks who are in the square, who are in the center. And I've seen a lot of towns that had provisions putting tattoo parlors, behind the blacksmith or someplace far away. And then they ended up permitting them right downtown, as in Abington. And no one cared, and in Bridgewater for that matter. It's a business. The people don't all even come in motorcycles. So I think the whole feeling that you have to put it in an industrial area only and hide it takes away one active business from areas that could use a variety of attractions. Anyway.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Jim Sharkansky, Advisory Committee. Just want to get a clarification. Currently, the body art is allowed in the limited industrial, which is the Beale Street, everything north of the Beale Street, including the shipyard, and then also the shipyard, which is an industrial area. You're looking to add the industrial park off of Derby Street as well, or limit it to just the industrial park of Derby Street and take away the other two? That's what the conversation is about now?
It seems like 4 members of the board would take it away from that North Hingham section and put it only in,
The Derby Street area?
only in the industrial park off of
areas.
Route 3.
Okay. All right. And that being the case, then this warrant article being proposed would be reworded and resubmitted.
Yeah, because this was only an drafted informationally, but
Okay.
they would actually, if they changed it in any way, I would propose the language and they would vote on it. And it would get submitted to advisory and it's as voted.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure I understand what's
Yeah.
going on.
Do you have any opinion on where it should go?
Do I have an opinion? I kind of echo this gentleman where tattoos have become pretty mainstream. The television shows about tattoo parlors now. It's very common for those who enjoy it or want to indulge in it. As long as it's a business and it meets the Board of Health standards and it's well kept and it's a shop, it's potential commercial revenue, taxes to the town. I wouldn't try to dissuade that from happening.
And it's been allowed in these areas since 2001, and we don't have one yet, so.
No, we don't have one. And I guess the question I have is the genesis of where this came from. I don't see a huge push to have tattoo parlors in Hingham, but if there were one, I would think a business person would want it in a more commercial area, more trafficked area than an industrial park. But
The genesis, just so people know, is in looking at the use table in connection with the registered marijuana dispensaries. I was just looking through all the various uses, and I just pointed out to the board that adult entertainment was in one district and body art was in different districts, and they're talking about where do we put the registered marijuana dispensaries, and it just started the conversation of, is this what we intended, what makes sense now? So it's really just a revisiting for discussion purposes.
no, I understand. I'm trying to stay neutral. I would just suggest tattoos, body art is not really an adult business any longer. I mean, there are teenagers that have tattoos. I mean, so I don't see it as an adult business, more of with the consult of their parents. Usually the teenager can have a tattoo, or even against the parents' wishes, they might have the tattoo. So, I don't see it in the same category. But, I just wanted to understand this warrant article and what's the activity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Okay, so you're going to draft it and bring it
Well,
back?
okay, so the question is, do you want to withdraw the article, leave it the way it is, add the industrial park, or amend it to be only industrial park and prohibit it everywhere else? So those are the 3 options. So I just want to confirm what the board wants to do, because if I could give you the language right now and you can be done with it.
I would add industrial park.
What do you guys want to do? I guess on the older one, I'd limit it, but that's just my opinion.
That's my instinct.
What did Walter say then? Sorry?
That's my instinct, is to leave it, just put it in the industrial
You
Yeah.
mean leave the others?
and prohibit it every place else.
Yeah. I mean, that's my instinct too, but I hear what people are saying about it being more mainstream.
I mean, I agree with the comments too. I'd be in favor of putting up just limited. You can still get one in town. You just got to go up to the industrial park to get it. So sounds like we have four in that vein. Okay. All right. So it'd be
I'll read you the
industrial park.
language. If you guys agree with it, then someone can so move. So, will the town amend the zoning bylaw of the town of Hingham, adopted March 10th, 1941, as heretofore amended, to allow body art establishments under section 4.21 of the zoning bylaw by special permit A2 in the industrial park district, and prohibit such use in all other zoning districts, or act on anything related thereto?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, all right. The last article is Article 1, is continuation of hearing on proposed amendment to the zoning map, all right? So, obviously I wasn't at the last meeting, so where are we at with this article?
Okay, so what happened at the last meeting, because there had been some questions raised, some residents had raised some questions to the staff regarding the history of the parcels and how they had been created. So I had done some title research, and Emily and Mary had done some review of the history of the zoning changes in that area. And it was, at one given time, these two residential lots were part of a much larger parcel that was part of the country club, that was privately owned and slated for a subdivision approval. There had been a denial of subdivision by the planning board, and in the course of the appeal of that, there was a settlement which allowed the creation of these two lots. So there is an approved subdivision plan with a road that's just a paper street, a subdivision road that's a paper street that was never built. That would be, if it was built, parallel to the driveway to the country club. So you drive in the country club, it would be a road. So that's the history. In the meantime, there were zoning district changes. Residence D was multifamily, which was also kind of in the planning at some point in the maybe 70s or 80s by the town. But then eventually the town made the choice to purchase the property. But it left these two lots, and they've been in Residence D ever since. So the owners of the property have come forward and asked to be in Residence A. There are, the home that directly abuts on South Street does have a historic preservation restriction on it. The preservation restriction is enforceable by the Historical Society and the town acting through the Board of Selectmen if it needed to be enforced. And then the back lot is landlocked and has access by a access easement. So that's the state of the two houses. I think at least the consensus of the three members here at the time was these are single family homes on single family, which are in effect de facto single family lots and abut other Residence A single family homes. So, but then they stopped there to wait for the full board.
Okay.
Judy, did I cover that correctly? Okay.
Any questions from the board?
I guess the question in thinking about it, I wasn't here at that other hearing, but thinking about it, so right now, if in order to develop the back lot and to get frontage on a public way, a subdivision roadway would be put in, is that what they're requesting?
The subdivision road would actually have to get built. There is reference, there was a variant, a special permit that was required. Is it a special permit or a variance? Because the easement driveway needed to go through the floodplain. So there was a permit from the ZBA to allow work in the floodplain. In the discussion portion of that decision, there's language about how, in agreement with the town, the actual approved subdivision road would never get built because of its proximity to the country club driveway, et cetera. But, I mean, you couldn't create another lot without the creation of frontage on a subdivision road.
And so if that lot had frontage, it would be in Residence District D, which is multifamily, rather than Residence District A.
As it stands right now.
As it currently stands. I guess the question I would have is, in trying to understand the intent back in the early 80s as to how this was all agreed to, why would we want to change that intent? What would be the reason to change any of that?
No, well, what happened is it must have been Residence District other than D at some point because there was a subdivision approval granted. But there was lots of...
And it would not have been in D.
And it would not have been in D. So it was Residence A at some point in time. But there were lots of changes in kind of how the town wanted to plan for this land. And it's a little bit of a checkered trying to piece it together. Emily spent a lot of time on it. But there is an approved subdivision plan for 2 residential lots for these 2 homes. Well, the one home existed already on South Street, and it allowed the developers to create a second residential lot in the back.
There are 2 homes up that
Yeah,
road.
there's 2 homes. I'm saying, once you gotta, it would take a very long time. Once you piece together all the title, there were multiple parcels of land that were all brought together and created this very large piece. And this home, which had much more land, this historic home on South Street, had much more land with it. And it was combined with numerous other lots to create this very large parcel, the majority of which is now the country club. But in the settlement at the time, when the developer sued the planning board, the settlement was they ended up with 2 lots, the existing house on its own lot and another lot in the back. The subdivision road could have been built at that time, but instead the developers agreed to just run an access easement and not create this road, which would be too close in proximity to the country club driveway. So the intention all along was for it to be 2 residential lots.
So 2 residential lots.
Single-family residential
Residence
lots.
District A, not D.
Right, but the town did lots of funky things with the zoning, which it's kind of hard to, Emily spent a lot of time on it, but it was really hard to piece
But
together
all the
intent.
all the other lots in that zone, in that neighborhood are Residence District A?
They're all A.
So, and how big is the parcel up in the back?
41,000 square feet.
So if it was Residence District D, how many dwellings could be built
Now,
on
you
that?
can't, it's a non-conforming, the house is now a legal grandfathered non-conforming use, because you cannot have single-family homes in Residence D.
So if a subdivision road, they can't develop it anyway, right? Because it doesn't have a subdivision roadway.
Right now, there is insufficient frontage on on an existing way to create additional lots.
So if you were to allow the development, I'm thinking of what's best for the neighborhood in the adjacent area, if you were to keep it Residence District A and allow 1 lot, would that be something that would be within the intent of the original provision and also would be consistent with the neighborhood?
Well, the only options in front of the town is to keep it the way it is or rezone it to A. Those are the only options in front of the town.
It's not to say Gary, that they couldn't, in the future, sort of, prove the road to be more than a paper street, get frontage and have enough, because they have 3,000 and 20,000 is required in Residence A. But I think the issue isn't could they develop this property. I think the issue is the zoning that they are currently in inconsistent with, the area?
Right.
I don't think that we're saying, aha, we want you to see if you can put another lot up here, but we're saying, gosh, this doesn't make sense.
Right, I would,
And you're right, it is 3 lots. It's the original house on South Street and then the 2
Two
lots in the
lots.
back, yep.
So 262, 264, 266. Okay. All right. Anybody from the audience like to ask any questions, or do we have any of the citizens here who signed the petition?
I am.
Like to say anything, ma'am, or add to that?
No.
Okay. All right. Any need for further discussion? Now, this is not, because the article's not coming from the planning board, it's a citizen's article, so we just endorse it?
No, you need to, well, all the planning board's doing tonight is whether or not to recommend the town meeting adopt the
Yeah,
zoning change.
okay.
So you just need to make a report whether or not you recommend it.
Can I make a motion that we recommend a request for zoning change as it relates to 262, 264, 266 South Street?
Second.
and the zoning change would be to Residence A from D.
Yes.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Susan, thanks very much for your hard work, especially on the marijuana article. All right, trying to stay on schedule here, we're going to move right along. We do have a discussion with the town engineer, Roger Fernandez. He's going to talk about acceptance for Bears Cove Drive. Roger?
Because I'm not officially here, I'm going to sit.
I'm sorry, I want to know one thing. On that last article, were there any abstentions on that article?
Abstain.
All right, I'm going to ask the record note that Walter's abstaining, he has a conflict, all right?
Okay.
All right, thank you, sorry. I'm sorry, Linda, go ahead.
I just have a quick question.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Could you let me know who on the planning board has each of the different articles so that we can coordinate when we're writing our recommendations?
Sure.
And coordinate strategy for town meeting, but each of us are assigned to each individual article, and so we'd like to work with whoever on the planning board is also assigned to the article.
Okay, sounds good. I think we'll give Gary the body art one.
Jim's got the
All right, what we'll do is the next
Don't
meeting.
make a good pair.
The next meeting, we'll work that one out, and we'll get you the names, if you could note that on the agenda.
That'd be great. Thank
All right,
you.
thank you. Thanks for coming tonight. Thank you.
Can I ask you a procedural question?
Yeah.
It's 20 to 9. Are we really, I wonder if there's people here who want to do like this and this and this and
We
this.
could do, we're not, John Chessie's not going to count. He's asking.
And they're not here.
People who are here, like we organize as individuals, but they don't show up. Roger's going to be fast. Right, Roger?
No, I just,
You're going to be fast.
in fairness,
Steve has ours here.
So what we could do after, this shouldn't take very long. It shouldn't be very long, then we could go out of order if you want.
Thank you. Thank you. Roger Fernandez, Town of Hingham Town Engineer. So I'm coming before the board today to ask for your recommendation to accept Bear Cove Park Drive as a public way. It's currently a town road, meaning that it's owned by the town, but it has never been formally accepted as a public way, again, in the formal sense. It was constructed as part of the DPW building in Carlson Fields project. So the road itself was built in and around 2009. It's about 2,700 feet long, and you might be asking yourself, so if it's a town road, Roger, why do you want us to accept it? Well, the answer to that question is by adding the roadway to our town inventory, I'm then able to petition the state and increase our lane miles in the town of Hingham, thereby increasing our Chapter 90 funding. So that just means on an annual basis, I just get more money from the state for a road that I already own and maintain. In addition to that, another benefit is, we've got a lot of utilities in the road. Those utilities by default become part of those respective utility companies. So if we have a water issue or water break, by virtue of this project, they'll be able to take ownership of some of that stuff. Not that we anticipate that that's going to be a problem. All the infrastructure in the roadway is new as part of the original project. And so really, to be brief, that's what we're here for. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to
Is
answer
it the
those.
roadway that goes all the way to the entrance to Bear Cove Park? I mean, is that the full length of the roadway?
Yep, it does go all the way from Fort Hill Street, and it continues all the way to the entrance of Bear Cove Park itself. Hopefully this won't fall. And so what we did is, when we laid it out, we did make some provisions for some of the stuff that we might have in the traditional sort of roadway acceptance plan. You're seeing a cul-de-sac sort of end at the end of the road. We just wanted to make sure that if the Quint had to get down there, if there was an issue with sort of public safety, that they had the standard dimensions that we like to see. We require 96, we've got a 150-foot radius there. I'm sorry, diameter there. The layout of the road at its narrowest is 46 feet wide. We could make it wider, but that satisfies the requirements for a minor road. The other thing we considered as part of the layout is we put in a spike strip along the only residential abutters. That's town-owned property. Again, we don't envision that that's going to be a problem, but just as a fail-safe, we put that in the plan as well. So the actual layout of the road does not go all the way up to the private property.
But the right-of-way is, the right-of-way exists, the required right-of-way.
It does.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So, right, we did not make it narrower just to
You just
be
didn't
included.
pave it, yeah.
Yeah, correct. I'm trying to think if there might be any other.
Roger, on the residential properties on that plan
Yeah.
that are in the, it looks like the meets and bounds are in the right-of-way, is that an easement, or is that a?
Oh, that's shown on the
Those two
plan?
properties, yeah.
You mean individual bounds themselves?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they actually located those. So we have a RLS working on this. I can find that out and shoot you an email, but I'm not sure if they physically located those in the field. Typically, what they would do, as you know, Gary, is they would put a designation that actually says found on the plan, and I don't see that there. So if it doesn't say found, my sense is that it's a record bound.
So the 40-foot right-of-way would exist all through there where the easements are.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And just one question about the cul-de-sac, that end of the roadway doesn't seem like it's up to town standards.
It is not. It is not. So when we submit this to the state, they, traditionally in a regular street acceptance process, we'd make sure that the road's built to standards. In this particular case, that section of the road is not. The balance of the road is. There's no intention of bringing it up to standards, but again, by adding it to our inventory, the state would not come to me and say, Roger, it's not up to standards. All they care about is this a public way? And if the answer is yes, what I basically try to do is just squeeze as much lineal footage I could out of the project in order to increase our
And the only
potential for
reason we
funding.
really care about a roadway being up to standard is that if it's not, the highway department has to deal with that in the
Correct.
future. So
And
the
they
highway
have to
department
deal
would
with
have
it
to deal with
anyway.
this if
We would
it's-
take on that
if it's a
liability
problem,
then,
right.
and then that would
So-
have to be dispersed throughout the rest of the town, and we wouldn't want to do that.
Right,
So
no, I
we
mean,
wanna make sure.
yeah, I think that the only reason we care about it being up to standard is because we have to deal with it. If it's not, we have to
Correct.
deal with this anyway. We're dealing with it now anyway,
Yeah.
so it makes
And I
total
know
sense.
the road's built right. I built it myself, so I guarantee you it's in good shape.
Well, I'm on the lot, I have no problem with it.
All right, any other questions from the board? Anybody from the audience like to ask a question? All right, I'd make a motion that we act favorably on the proposal to publicly accept the road of Bear Cove Park Drive as presented.
Are we voting to accept the road or to recommend that the?
We recommend
Under the
acceptance.
state statute, the planning board has to make a report to the Board of Selectmen as to whether or not you believe the road should be laid out. And then the Board of Selectmen have to have a hearing to lay out the road, and then it goes to town meeting, and town meeting has to accept the road.
Right.
So it's planning board report, selectmen lay it out, town meeting accepts it. That's the process.
Well, actually, at the end of the memo, there's a recommended motion if you'd like to
Oh, I didn't see
consider
that.
that. Yeah.
Great. You have the memo? Thank you. All right. Okay, great. All right. I would make a recommended motion that the planning board vote to recommend the street acceptance of Bear Cove Park Drive so that the Board of Selectmen may vote an order of layout for final consideration at the upcoming annual town meeting 2014. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Roger. Good evening. All right, I think we normally don't do this, but what I'm going to do now is make a motion to the board here that we rearrange the agenda briefly. We have a subdivision proposal coming in at 8:30. Obviously, we'll pass that. But as I can see in the audience here, I think everybody's here for the CPC discussion, which I don't think will take too long. So I would make a motion that we rearrange the agenda to discuss Article 6 under old new business at this time. Is there a second for that?
Second.
As long as nobody's here for something before then, do you know?
I thought you just asked me to.
I don't know. No, I would like
Okay.
you to do that, but I,
Is there,
yes.
is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Is the 8:30 applicant here? I don't see Mrs. Albrecht. Okay, so then it's timely. Okay, all right. So for this article, the board received a request from the Board of Selectmen for our input into only 3 of the CPC projects. And the 3 we requested input into was the Whiting Street proposal, the recreation proposal, and the proposal for the Masonic Lodge, the roof of the Masonic Lodge. So is that your understanding, Mary?
Yes.
So those are the only 3 we've been asked for input into. We're going to take those in order from Whiting Street Recreation, Masonic Lodge. I'm going to abstain from the vote on the Masonic Lodge and discussion of that item, as I'm a member of that organization. I've assisted them with their application. So, Gary, why don't you give us a little overview? We'll take some board questions and
Okay.
we'll go from there.
Okay, if the first is 173 Whiting Street. 173 Whiting Street, the overall property is an antique cape and a large barn on 6.2 acres of land. This parcel is 2 parcels east of the Dunkin' Donuts at the end of Gardner Street, on the east side of Whiting Street. And the property, the front portion has the house. The back portion of the property is approximately 4 acres of wooded land. And this property, and I just wanted to get a map out here. If one looks at this parcel and one sees this map, one sees Whiting Street coming here. Here's Gardner Street. And so the parcel with the house is this outline parcel in red. And the front portion on Whiting Street would be the 2.5 acres with the house. The eastern portion, which is primarily rectangular, is the 4 acres, which it abuts the green parcel here, which is already conservation land, which fronts on Gardner Street.
Where's the green one on this map you gave us?
So if you were to look at the aerial photo, which is that map.
Which one? At the end, okay.
So let me just get the, if you're looking at I was looking at the one, the colored map first. So this is Gardner Street, and so what this green parcel is currently owned by it's conservation land owned by the town. This back 4 acres would attach to that. And so the idea is that what we also see in this map is there's a large amount of open land that's in between Gardner Street, Main Street, and Whiting Street. The green parcel here, this shaded green parcel, is the parcel that we, town meeting, agreed to purchase last year, which is immediately south of the middle school. And all the rest of the property that's in this large area, the middle school has this piece, and then this large white piece is owned by the Archdiocese of Boston, and on it is Notre Dame and Resurrection Church. So the idea is down the road, Two things. The first and foremost reason to purchase this property is to add to the properties that are protected within the Accord Pond Aquifer Protection District. In all of our, and the reason for that would be to increase the amount of recharge of water into that aquifer. The reason it's significant is because right now 25% of that aquifer protection district is either paved or impervious in terms of roof area, and so with the coming increased development along Derby Street, we're going to, which is also in the Aquifer Protection District, we'll have more impervious space. And so the approach here is that this piece of land adds to that pervious area, which would assist in the recharge of the aquifer. It's the fundamental reason why the town agreed to purchase this large green parcel, which is 13.5 acres immediately south of the middle school, was to protect the aquifer. Right now, the property is in negotiation in terms of working out the appropriate appraisal and those kinds of business issues, legal and business issues. I believe, and I was going to ask if we could ask Scott or Matt, maybe you could give us some more current information on that, on where we stand in terms of the negotiations with the owner and that kind of thing.
You like that stuff?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, just come up, if you come up with the mic and identify yourself.
Sure.
And Scott is the project manager for the CPC on this particular article.
Yeah, Scott Kazanzik, CPC. And yeah, this was one article that pretty much throughout our vetting process was one of these projects that just seemed to kind of not really get defined to the point where we felt we had enough information to make a decision. And it wasn't until kind of really the 11th hour when the owner seemed to be much more willing to venture with this possibility of acquiring this property separate from the real estate that's developed area, to the point where an appraisal was really seemed to be the really logical next step. And that's currently in process. It's only been a week, and we were told it'd be a 2 to 3 week process. So unfortunately, I don't have any information that would really shed more light on what exactly the number would be on this property. But that'll be known within the next week or two. So right now, the understanding is as long as the appraisal comes in within a ballpark of what we anticipate, then we would like to move forward with the owner to work out the proper legal and other documents that would be necessary. And yet, in addition to this possibility with the town, there is apparently some discussion of a commercial interest moving in, which obviously would come before you as far as a commercial would be a different use, and that property would require a zoning variance or change for whatever the proper term is, I don't know. But
Scott, on the commercial use, that would be for the 2.5 acres, which is in the aerial photo here. The front 2.5 acres is currently residential.
Right.
There's a proposal to have a commercial use in the Cape and large barn here, but that the back land, even if it was a commercial use, the back land would still be conservation?
correct, and most of that land is, if not in the wetland area, it's certainly within, so it would be something that, most of that is probably undevelopable, in which case it's not something that's so imminent that we need to protect it. But at the same time, the control of that property could very well go to a private citizen in the event that these appraisals don't come in as we would anticipate. But it is a nice piece, like you said. It really creates a nice connector to the ultimate goal of tying in that whole part of South.
And also, could you speak to the Conservation Commission's view relative to the importance of this, too?
Well, I know first and foremost, Abby has emphasized the water protection. I think that was the first thing you brought up as well, which we know from our surveys and with the town, as Matt just described, probably at some point in time, and other members here could attest, that water protection is the #1 driver for a lot of these open space or CPC monies to support open space acquisition. So that is very heavily weighted in this particular project.
And I think consistent with that, one of the things that we've heard at a number of the meetings that have been held recently, there's another one scheduled on Thursday relative to the aquifer, to this whole area.
Yeah.
The Ackord Pond aquifer is the level of stress relative to this basin, which is another reason why people were thinking that as an investment in the future, this would be a good purchase.
Yeah, without knowing fully where this area will look 10 years from now, I'm sure you have better ideas than I do, but it just seems like this is an area that's you can't replicate this too many places. So
I think one of the things we've learned over time is that what we think is undevelopable ends up becoming, as you say, the land can change, so as we have opportunities, especially, I think, connecting properties, it makes a lot of sense.
yeah, that's why we see it, but appraisals are very important in the process, so
Right.
that's kind of made the move that
Waiting
let's
for that,
go ahead and
yeah.
get this appraisal, so that'll at least give us more concrete numbers to really make the financial decisions. But yeah, it'll have to wait for at least another week or two.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, so the property, though, like I see on your third page, Gary, there's this whole yellow section. That means that the property does not connect Main Street to the middle,
It doesn't currently connect to
Okay.
the diocesan property. There are two other parcels that the little yellow
Three. One, two, three.
diagram is if you wanted to, and in another CPC article, we're looking at putting together a trails plan for the interconnected open space parcels, which would map all the open space that currently exists and educate people as to its existence, but also access, how they could get to it and use it. And so the thought on this trails plan, which would be an update of the whole town's open space, would suggest that perhaps an easement could be discussed with the current owners of those three diamond-shaped parcels for access to them, if there were to be access to the backlands.
So that would have to be worked out.
Yeah.
And then on the colored map, in your legend, the third little picture of the little grassy things says that that's wetlands. So really the 4 acres, is it 4 acres? What's the parcel?
4 acres is the tan.
Is the tan part.
Tan
So the
rectangle.
4 acres is 85% wetlands.
Mhm.
So what is the danger to the aquifer if it stays in private hands?
The danger is that ultimately, if the backlands that are immediately to the east of this and this are connected, there's an issue of development, and there's the question of
But it's
if-
all wetlands.
well, I still think there's areas within this that could be developed, and...
Like which part, though, of those 4 acres?
Well, you see that upland
Yeah,
area.
Matt could probably address
But you
this.
can't get there.
Matt Zeiper from the CPC, Peter Hobart Drive, so I'm Farm Hills resident as well. In talking to Abby Pearsall, the conservation agent, she actually questions this is from Mass GIS, which is not at the same specificity if these wetlands were flagged. Obviously can't do that right now because of the snow cover. So she actually, again, in brief conversation with her, questions that the extent of the wetlands is as pervasive as it indicates from that Mass GIS photo. We did walk the property. The extent of the wetlands seemed far less than that map depicts. In fact, when you go down the hill towards the back piece of the land, much of it seemed dry. There was a stream, but it did not appear to be that extent of wetlands.
I mean, when we walked this, it appeared to be, it's all meadow behind the house, and it's mowed as a lawn and formerly a meadow or a farm land piece. But as you walk through, there's only one small area in the middle where there's a little brook, but the rest of it is all overgrown meadow in terms of the trees. So I would say that I would agree that our perception when we walked it is different than the extent of it indicated on this, on the aerial photo.
Yeah, I'll just speak for a moment as someone who lives in Farm Hills, where there is very little access to any open space. So the potential, in speaking briefly with people in Farm Hills Neighborhood Association, I know that Scott has been in touch with folks there as well. The potential opportunity, again, this is the nature of doing interconnected trails is it happens over time. You purchase one piece and then you try and assemble other connected parcels. The potential access for people in South Hingham to go from behind the Dunkin' Donuts from Gardner Street, conceivably to Main Street, and then across to the Pushcart Farm towards Scotland Road and towards Wampatuck is a very attractive recreational amenity in a part of town that has none. We spent the earlier part of the meeting hearing about the zoning overlays, and they're all, many of the uses that were described are all in the South Hingham Overlay District. So to the extent that there's a provision for recreational access in behind this residential area, I think that's very attractive to people in South Hingham, which we all recognize. We live there. We know that the opportunity for commercial development should be exploited to the best sense that it conforms with the fact that there are hundreds of residential homes there, and the opportunity to provide this, I think, again, would meet with favor from people in Farm Hills. So,
I would just add one more thing, and I appreciate what you're saying, and it would be lovely to be able to connect all that property back there. But before putting a dollar amount on this, I think that issue of the wetlands should really be confirmed, to get the facts on it, because I think CPC money shouldn't be spent on property that isn't developable anyway, but that's my personal opinion. Unless it is a significant piece that's been on the open space acquisition committee, because we have 31% open space in Hingham right now, so we kind of, I think in the last few years, have decided to save CPC money to go after that kind of targeted property that we've said, oh gosh, wouldn't it be great to have the mobile station at the harbor? And so because we were conservative in the years leading up to that, we were able to make that happen. So that's just my personal opinion on sort of strategic purchases. But it just so happens that this weekend I bumped into someone who wanted to buy this property and said that they wanted to put a small office in there. They understand that it's residential. They went to the owner. They said, we want to work with the town to get it rezoned since it's next to a similar office use. And in exchange for the rezoning, we'd like to talk to the town about donating the property in the back. So I would recommend that, depending on the dollar amount, if it turns out to be that the dollar amount is insignificant, then maybe this would just expedite that. But if there's a private party who's willing to donate the land to the town, and as far as I know, the house has been on the market for a very long time, and this buyer was willing to pay the asking price for it, and then come to the town and negotiate a rezoning in exchange for the property, my personal recommendation would be to wait.
Yeah, we discussed this. This has been on the radar screen of the Open Space Committee, the CPC, for months, that potential commercial opportunity. It has seemed reasonably illusory that it's heard about it, didn't hear anything more about it. I think the CPC voted favorably on this to give ourselves the flexibility to see if we can reach a deal. We don't know what the appraisal is going to bear out. I think it's hard to make the assumption as the CPC with the facts in front of us that we will go and get that future landowner will be the person who negotiates the deal and receives a zoning change, either a variance or some type of town meeting bylaw change. That seemed a leap we weren't comfortable taking given the opportunity within this parameter. We don't know what the appraisal is going to bear out. It may be, and the appraisal is going to take into account wetlands. They might, if the appraisal comes in and says it's $37,000, well, this landowner's not interested in that price range. If the appraisal comes out far in excess of that, we'll see if there's a deal. So
what is the range that you're looking at?
Well, the landowner, the range, Scott, was 155 to 100 and... plus and then the warrant article includes the associated legal costs and appraisal and survey, all that stuff in the easement endowment. So we don't know. We may come, I mean, so we're sort of waiting with the same expectation that you all are to see what this appraisal bears out at. And it may be that the Wallachs say, this doesn't work for us. And then they may find, look, everything else being equal, well, we started the year with $5 million worth of requests for CPC funds. We're pretty careful stewards of that money. We would love to have this property acquired by the town in exchange for a commercial development that didn't cost the town money. I don't think anyone's averse to that. But the only facts we had in front of us at the time where we could make a warrant recommendation was that we would recommend this to. Otherwise, we thought, we'll walk away, a deal falls apart, someone else buys it. Who knows what happens? We don't know if people assemble parcels. They put a 40B in the middle of the Acorn Brook recharge area, which is something we didn't want to countenance. So.
And I would think that this couldn't be a variance, as this would have to be a zoning change, which would have to be voted on by town meeting. So that's a fairly, lengthy process,
Okay.
In terms of that kind of an exchange, which seems a little tricky to me. I mean, we've done it before on larger parcels, but to make a deal with a landowner and say, yeah, we'll go forward with rezoning your parcel in exchange for something, and that's tough. I mean.
We've done it, though. And it doesn't
on
seem
properties
like
like
this
Black
isn't-
Rock, a golf
Well,
course.
and on Beale Street,
I think that one of the things I might add, too, is that
right?
Yes, yeah. It was, yeah.
having
Close
participated
enough.
in the
Yeah.
CPC process relative to all of the land parcel potential applications, we started out with 8, and actually adding this, it would be 9. And I must say, the due diligence that was done by the CPC representatives on every single one of these applications was very thorough. And I think that we went through a number of discussions recognizing earlier directions from town meeting relative to the reason for which we buy open space as a town. And I think we were very careful. We saw a lot of projects no longer, they didn't get to the reality phase because they didn't pass muster.
Yeah, I was the project
Process.
manager for 3 open space projects that absolutely seemed no threat of development at all, or of no public interest to the town. And so we kicked those out. This stayed in, albeit with the fact that the landowner was at a price point for much of the negotiation of 3 times what we could, have this negotiation for now. So we didn't think it was a real opportunity.
Right.
Again, I think back to, and I'm participating in this watershed forum Thursday night, this is a heavily stressed basin. You can read reports from 15 years ago that it was heavily stressed in the mid to late 90s, and it's only gotten worse. And so this is, again, my opinion, and I think was shared by the Conservation Commission. The reason you buy land, at least in this part of town, is to provide that aquifer recharge, and that's you can't go backwards once it's paved over. So who knows if that would happen, but.
All right, thanks. Let's move on. Sure, but please make it brief. We got to move on.
My comments are more apply to this, but are more generic. So in the 3 years now that I've been in the role in real estate council, I've been asked to work on a number of projects, some that have come up while I've been in the role, and some that started long before and still aren't to fruition. And so what I think in looking at these types of projects, about CPC and the town in general, Concom through their conservation fund, is it's nice to look at potential maybe in the future, or can we tie it in the future? But I think you need to look at the value of the parcel as it is, even if you never get a connection, because if the town were to acquire this with the hope someday there's a connection over 1, 2, 3, 4 private parcels, I wouldn't go that direction. I'm working on 3 things right now where the town has made investments on the assumption or on the informal conversation with private landowners that easements would be granted, and it's been years and a lot of money, and they're still not done. So I would just suggest that you look at the value, assuming all you get is what you get, and there may not be something in the future. If it happens in the future, great, But I do see that assuming great connections in the future and what that will actually cost the town to get it and make it happen are two different things.
To my understanding, Susan, I think all of the negotiations on the value of the property is its acreage and its location.
Right, no,
It has
right.
nothing to do with...
Right, but I'm saying, you're right, but I mean, everyone's talking about, oh, wouldn't it be great we get through to Main Street, but that's for private property owners. And Notre Dame is not owned by the Archdiocese, it's owned by the Sisters of Notre Dame, which is a separate entity. So it's for, right now, there's 4 property owners you have to get through to get to the middle school and the other parcel. So it's just a generic comment about how to look at land acquisition going forward.
Okay, all right, moving on to the input into the recreation proposal. Gary, you want to just give us a couple-minute overview of that?
The recreation proposal is in the barn, which is the sole remaining building of the Hingham Cordage Factory, which and is located as far east as you can go behind the fields. And what is proposed is to essentially complete the interior of the barn. We have, in previous year, we have done the structural rehabilitation. The project was initially submitted on the rehabilitation as a historic preservation project. It's still eligible for that, but also there is the new 4th leg on the stool for the CPC, which is last year to allow funding for recreational uses and projects. The CPC contributed a certain sum of money to the high school field project last year as the first allocation under that category. And so the proposal is to spend, I believe it's $200,000 on the interior renovation of the building, which would provide much-needed recreation space for programs that Mark could better elaborate on the specifics than I, but that there is a demand and there is a need, and that facility is in the right location to provide for that demand and that need, and thereby the application. So perhaps I could ask Mark if you could maybe describe what the program...
How much money, Gary, sorry?
I think it's is it 200?
Let's just hold off a little bit. I mean, I think we're all familiar with the recreation programs.
Okay.
So maybe if we meet Mark, we'll...
It's 175.
175, okay.
Are there any questions from the board? I guess the one question I had directed to Matt was, I remember at the last CPC meeting I was at, there was a question of the legality of doing this. Has that been followed up?
We received the opinion of town council over the weekend, roughly. I have not had a chance to discuss it with Bob currently. The rough review of it was that town council supported the acquisition, supported the project. So I haven't read it in great detail, but that was the gist of the opinion.
Great. Anyone else?
I know there's a lot of stress on parking around the recreation department and the town hall in general's uses. How does this improved space get parked? I can't find my little thing right now. I saw that you have like 20 parking spaces shown on the...
So as you're coming in from Main Street, coming in this drive, here's the structure, and I believe I've got this orientation correct, where the middle school is, where town hall is down in this zone on the photo. They've got the orientation correct. You'd come in and there would be a proposed, I believe, 20 parking spaces immediately east of the building, adjacent to the building, as you're coming in from the access road.
From the fire station.
From the fire station, coming in off Main Street by the fire station. So as you currently come in to this building from the fire station, there's a parking area immediately to the right of the building that has about 10 spaces, if I'm not mistaken, and this plan would provide for 20 spaces on the east side of the building. So there would be new parking provided for this use.
Yeah, yeah, I see
Aerial.
it, I see it. I'm just wondering what the comparable use is and what the comparable kind of parking. I just want to make sure that we don't put something there that can't be parked. So do you have like a comparable use somewhere in town that shows that, yeah, the 20 spaces works for that?
Well, I think if you took 3.5 spaces or 5, let's say 5 spaces on 1,000 square feet, which would be a more intense use, or we took 3.5 spaces on 1,000 square feet, what's the square footage of the use? 2,000 square feet. One floor. So if we did 2,000 square feet and we had 5 spaces per 1,000, that's 10 spaces, if I've got the math correct. And I think what we're providing here is basically double that for that intensity of use. I don't know if the intensity would be any more than that, than the 5. What would you think, Dick, on it? Would on this type of a use? It's a recreational.
Yeah, I think we could look up the high
Yeah,
school
we could.
fields, because we,
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't have square footage there, and we used that.
Right, this project would require site plan, it would require an A3 and possibly an A2, or depending on how the use is defined. Are we expanding a non-conforming use, or is it a public building for government use that would require an A2?
Okay.
So the full design would have to be fleshed out.
All righty.
Any other questions or comments? All right, the last request was for input into Masonic Lodge, and I said earlier, I'm going to recuse myself, Gary, so why don't you...
So the application from the stewards of the Masonic Lodge is to essentially replace the roof with a roof that is of the original specification relative to the design and the period of the building. What's happened over the years, the building's about 80 or 90 years old, and what's happened, it's a historic building. It's across from the Armory on, is that Central Street? And it's a kind of a colonial revival building. It's brick. It was designed to have a slate roof. What had happened in recent years is that a less expensive asphalt roof had been put on the building, and there are serious problems with that roof relative to venting and other constraints that could not be accommodated in that building without changing the architecture of the eaves and the gables and the hip conditions. So the idea is to put a roof on the building that will last and be cost-effective and allow the building to basically proceed with the mission that it's currently provides to the town. And much like other small nonprofit organizations like the Girl Scouts or the Fire Museum or programs like that, which give a lot back to the town, being a nonprofit, they couldn't afford to do that particular capital improvement, and this is a one-time request. Also, the total cost of this roof is somewhere around $250,000. They are fundraising and are providing funds for about $100,000 of that on their own, and then they would be asking the CPC for $150,000. And so, given all of the presentation that we looked at and all the constraints, this seemed to be the best first cost and the best life cycle cost way to be able to preserve this building and have it last another 100 years. And so thereby this is what the CPC had entertained and voted on.
Why did the selectmen want the planning board's input on that?
I was asked what the planning board's opinion or sense was on these projects, and they hadn't fully been presented to the planning board. And so that was what brought us to the discussion tonight.
No, but I mean, the other two kind of are an issue of use of land, but this is
This is building
capital improvement.
and you
right?
know,
Yeah, I wasn't asked about this.
we're not looking at parking, and we're not looking at changing any of the siting, and we're not looking at changing any of the density of use or the types of use. So what this really is this kind of an application is something that would go in front of the Historic Districts Commission because it's a historic building. So I was a little unclear as to why, I mean, I thought to provide information was the request, but I didn't know anything more than that, unless there's...
I don't have anything to add to that.
But there's nothing under the planning board purview that this project would trigger, so in terms of review.
Unless it was waiver of site plan and building permit.
Right. And we're not doing any waivers and not doing any site plan review, so...
Okay, any questions?
No.
All right. So we were requested for input, Mary. Did the Board of Selectmen want us to vote to endorse it, or?
I think they're looking for a sense of the planning board's
Okay, and then I guess,
position. I don't think they're looking for a formal vote, was my understanding.
all right, are we comfortable with endorsing the CPC proposals as presented tonight?
I have strong reservations about the acquisition of Whiting Street before we get full information on the wetlands and on the market value of the property, given private interest in the property as well, and that it's been on the market for so long.
All right, comfortable with the other two? Judy?
Yeah, as long, I mean, from a planning perspective, yes.
Okay, Sarah?
I was just going to say, on the land acquisition, I have confidence that the CPC will be thoughtful about the acquisition cost of that in relation to the fact that it's a wetland. So I sort of trust them to make that decision, and I am fine with the other two.
Well, yeah, I think obviously based on the information we have, we're not even talking price on the acquisition of the Whiting Street. I'm in favor of pursuing all of them.
Okay. As am I, and please note my abstention for support of the Masonic Lodge. But I will say, just real briefly, I went to all the CPC meetings this year for the first time, and I was utterly impressed by that committee and the work you all did. And Gary, too, brought a lot of value to that committee as well, so it was great to see a planning board member helping out. But I thought you guys did an excellent job, so thank you for your many, many hours. All right.
Thank you.
Somebody wants to
Yeah, real quick, Tom, if you could go up to the mic, please.
So there was no vote right now. Tom Dallier, Recreation Commission. Since you're not taking a vote, could you make your decision loud and clear to the people who requested your input?
Sure.
Thank you.
We'll pass it on.
Right. Not just kind of a little more thing or anything like that, but just a loud and clear, so that in case there's any question or any kind of reconsideration of decisions or anything like that, that your voice is loud and clear.
I'm sure they're watching on TV, too.
Thank you.
A lot of them do.
I think what the planning board's stepping on a project like Recreation Commission is it's gonna have to go through permitting. So as long as the planning board's kind of support of the concept is not taken at a later date as it meets all permitting requirements, we haven't done that for
Right.
yet, so that's the only.
Just support of the concept tonight.
But it looks like an appropriate use for the site, right?
All right, thank you. Everybody, thank you. All right, I want to move on to our
Thank you for
our other
coming.
itms. So do we have the applicant for 249 Cushing Street here?
They've been in the hallway.
I know they've been kind of in and out.
They kind of missed the,
Missed
they've
the
been
bit.
sitting here.
I don't know if that gentleman was with them or not at the end. I mean, I saw him over there.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
So cold in here.
How are you today? Good to see you again. Good, haven't seen you in a while. All right.
I don't have a,
I think what we're going to do tonight, subject to input from my colleagues, is ultimately we're going to need Mr. Chessier here before we actually vote on it. So why don't you, if you could, maybe give us a maybe like 15, 20-minute overview so far of the subdivision, we'll ask some questions. We'll probably have to go back to the, the drawing board as usual, and we'll take a formal vote at a later meeting.
It's only a preliminary.
Sure. Oh, it's still preliminary? Oh, it is preliminary, yep, okay.
It's not this is a proposed two-lot subdivision at 249 Cushing Street. It's actually right opposite Beck Lane.
Gary, I don't think the TV can see.
Yeah,
Could
I'm
you
sorry,
put it on
why
this
don't
board
you move over here?
On the other table?
And go to the mic as well. Yeah, thank you.
And just
Yes.
stand behind the microphone.
Yes, you should
Why
smile.
don't you
You're
move
on
the-
television.
You can move
Can
the-
you camera?
Can you move the mic too?
Talking to the microphone, so why don't you use the chair?
I know you're not used to that at our meetings, but.
Well, this is getting official here now. This is a proposed two-lot subdivision. It's on, the house location is actually 249 Cushing Street. It's an existing, little over 3-acre parcel. And it is, as I stated, it's right opposite Beck Lane, just a little bit north of Apple Tree Lane, which is a fairly new subdivision, the two-lot. The proposed way is pretty simple. It's only, the pavement itself will be about 175 feet to the end. We are providing a 70-foot wide turnaround there for fire protection. Right-of-way will meet the requirements of all of the requirements in terms of the width and the size of the cul-de-sac. So that will be pretty much in conformance. The existing house is located at the front of the lot right here. And because of the issues associated with zoning, it will have to come down. I'm sorry. It will have to come down. We've already been in front of the ZBA. They've already pretty much turned us down for a variance request, so it will be removed in conjunction with this subdivision.
Is it a function of lot area, or just curious as to the basis?
It is a function of the fact that I can't get the right-of-way in without
Moving the house?
moving the house, yeah.
Is there potential of moving it?
I don't think there is. And I don't know if it's even worth trying to move it. That was the issue. If you were going to move it, was it worth it? Because now the problem would the driveway itself be able to be maintained? So there is a possibility there might actually be the construction of another house right there. Basically, the ZBA indicated to us we can maintain the nonconformance with Cushing Street, so, which is only...
What's the nonconformance with Cushing?
It is located only 28 feet off of the existing right-of-way, and the required, under zoning, the required front yard is 50 feet. So,
Is there a reason why the cul-de-sac is so close to Cushing Street? If the cul-de-sac were moved further west, could you, I'm just curious, how big is the lot on Cushing Street if the cul-de-sac is so close to Cushing Street? Is it-
actually, the lot itself, if you look at it, the lot it's two lots. This is the first lot right here, which is on the back side of the cul-de-sac. And the second lot is actually, a portion of it's located here, and the balance of it is out here.
It's connected?
It's connected, yeah. There's a strip here and a strip here. There are two
So the
strips.
first lot is a big oval that contains the second lot?
That's correct.
Like in the middle of a donut?
In the middle of a donut, yes. Yes.
Just curious, that's a unique one. I haven't seen that done before. I'm just curious as to how did that...
Well, part of it was the requirement for the length of the dead end. Because in order to meet the dead end requirement and get a lot in here that met the shape factor, I had to exceed the 400 feet, which would have been a variance, which I know a waiver, which I know that's one waiver that I'm really not looking forward to obtaining.
You've done this before.
That was the first one. So when we realized that we couldn't get it that way, then at that point in time, it was move the cul-de-sac pretty much the bulb up as close as we could and maintain, the two two areas in the back for the proposed dwellings. So there's a possibility that this house may actually get moved to this spot or may actually get moved to the back.
So you might have the lot on Cushing Street as open space.
That's correct.
that would be part of the front, be part of the middle house, the middle lot house?
It'd be part of the back. It'd be
Back.
part of the back, yeah. Now, the right-of-way and the roadway will actually physically line up exactly with Beck Lane, so we will be directly opposite that entrance.
And will the existing driveway be sealed up?
This one over here?
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to guarantee that.
Oh, okay.
That I don't know, but I'm not going to guarantee, I'm not going to tell you yes or no, I just don't know.
Yeah.
There is, obviously, there is an opportunity for maybe an accessory building in the front.
And how close would the middle lot house be to the house immediately to the north?
This lot, this one here?
Yeah.
Oh, no, it would be that.
I see.
No, it wouldn't be that close at all.
So there's a rectangle in the back with that building?
That is an old chicken coop.
Oh, I see.
This used to be a farm. This was, one of them was the brooding, and one of them was the egg laying, or one of, yeah? Actually, both of them. They were former farm buildings, and the only thing that's left now is the foundations, but they do conform to zoning. So at this point, I'm not showing that they're going to be removed. They'll just be foundations that'll stay there. It'll be up to the homeowner to determine how they want to deal with it at that point in time.
What is the graphic of the house, the lot immediately north of the chicken coop? That curved, the next one, what is that graphic? What does that represent?
Which one?
That gray shaded area?
The slope.
Is that slope?
here?
Is that a gradient?
Yeah, it's a slope.
It's a slope.
Yeah, that's a slope. This is, it's funny, this parcel sits kind of up on it. It is up on a
It's
hill.
on a knoll, right?
Yeah, up on a knoll. There was actually an old driveway that ran back towards Cape Cod Lane. And from my understanding from historical records, it served an old farm that was way out in the back. And this was their primary access, because there is a 20-foot wide access easement on the adjacent lot that is to the benefit of the applicant.
What would be the lot area of A and B in this subdivision?
One is 40,000, the other one is 70,000.
So on the front lot, you could do a three-bedroom house, and on the back lot, you could do a larger house?
Yeah, you could do, yeah. Obviously, I'm kind of hoping that we'll be able to balance it off with the Board of Health, be able to get a 4 and a 4.
I'm still confused with where Lot 1 has its frontage. Your proposed Lot 1. I just...
In the front.
Lot 1, look at this one. Lot 1 is this, and goes around here, so this is Lot 1 also. That's why, you see what I'm saying? So Lot 2 is like on top of Lot 1. It's like
The donut within.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to get my hands around the idea of one lot's the
It
hole in
just
the
doesn't
donut,
make
and the other one's the donut,
sense to
so.
me.
Well, as you said, you could have accessory buildings, like the backyard, would be the front.
I know, but I still, I can't kind of get, process that.
Yeah. So
It's either that or the front of Lot 1 becomes kind of a park area. Because there's really, there's very little, in terms of the buildable space trying to meet zoning, there's very little area. You look at the building setbacks associated with it, there's very little area there. You can see the garage and the shed that's currently on the lot would have to be removed.
On the plans, you list out 5 waivers.
5 waivers.
Do you
yeah, we're looking
anticipate
for.
any other waivers in addition to the 5?
No, those were it. And the waivers that I'm requesting are specifically an effort to try and reduce the overall damage associated, to minimize the amount of activity associated with the construction of the roadway. That's all we're doing. The overall, when you look at the right-of-way and you look at the shape factor associated with the right-of-way, it's pretty much, it is in conformance with the requirements under the zoning, under the subdivision rules and regulations. The only waiver that we are requesting is really roadway construction waivers.
So the waivers you've got are, to allow, the first one is to allow the road to be constructed with a Cape Cod berm on one side only. What does that do? And what's the downside of that relative to drainage and stuff?
What I'm asking to do is, there's a natural, if you look at it, there's a natural hole where the garden, if you walk out, although you're not going to see it now, it's under the snow. If you walk out there's a natural depression right here where the garden is right now. So that is pretty much the current drainage pattern, and I'd like to try and maintain that. So essentially, what I'd like to do is pitch the roadway in its entirety back to that spot, drain it down into that hole, put a leaching pit off to the offside, and utilize it.
So that's a swale, that's a low point?
Yes, there's a low point. And that's kind of what if you look at it, most of the waivers, so when I looked at it, the Cape Cod berm on the right side becomes superfluous. It really doesn't serve any real purpose, so that's why I requested it. I mean, putting it back in just adds another 1.5 foot of pavement.
So would that become a drainage easement in the middle of that lot?
Well, it's actually still located within the limits of the cul-de-sac.
Oh, it's within the radius?
Within the radius, yeah. It's within the bulk.
You propose to build a hammerhead.
Yes, but the hammerhead would not impose on that hole itself.
So it would be a drainage structure that would receive this stormwater runoff?
We could actually create, my intent was to create a rain garden in there, something more natural, and then have an overflow into a dry well. And that would be the limit. It's only, like I said, it's only 175 feet of roadway. It's not, I think my driveway on my house is almost that long.
So then the second waiver was to allow the minimum centerline grade to be reduced from 1% to 0.5%.
And once again, that was just trying to minimize the cuts associated with the construction of the roadway. You know, if we went to the 1%, you just end up going a little deeper.
And that would say 0.5% coming in from a high point just west of Cushing?
Yes, right.
So part of it would drain out to Cushing, part of it would drain, the rest of it would drain back?
About the first 10, 12 feet would drain out to Cushing. That would be it.
And what is Cushing, how is Cushing?
We're right on the peak of Cushing.
Are there catch basins at that area?
No, I don't believe so.
No.
No, I know there's none there. I think it would end up,
100 feet away.
yeah, down the hill.
I'm thinking about winter and sheet flow across Cushing and ice and all that.
I mean, one of the comments that I got from John was the issue associated with sight distance at the front. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to develop a profile of Cushing Street itself, just to show him that I do have it.
Because you're right at the bend, I see.
Yeah, we're right at the bend and we're right at the peak.
And so the third is related to this rain garden, is use of lid methods of runoff rather than catch basins?
That's pretty much it. Just to use an LID.
And the fourth is the use of concrete bounds rather than granite monuments. Now, are these concrete bounds on the inboard cul-de-sac side, or are these also along Cushing Street?
They would pretty much be all of the bounds that are required. I don't believe the highway department is actually utilizing the granite bounds, the granite markers anymore.
I know on Baker Hill, we required granite all along the public right-of-way, but then in the back, they could use the concrete. Concern is, how long are they going to last?
I guess, it would be kind of silly to use Hingham highway bounds to mark out a private way. But certainly, if you wanted that, actually, I'm not really quite sure. I guess they'd have to they'd have to probably go to a stone cutter and have him cut the HHB into them.
I think at the smaller subdivisions, the roadways along Main Street, we've asked for the granite along the public right-of-way, but, okay.
Have you done the lot shape factor on Lot 1?
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing we're trying to avoid, is that crazy configuration of lots. So I feel like it's in violation of the intent if it does satisfy it. It's absolutely what we're trying to avoid. Crazy lot configurations based on, nonsense. That, narrow area, it just defies logic to me. It doesn't, so I will look carefully at that, I think.
I guess I see a sort of an abstract, I'm following what Sarah was saying, I see an abstract kind of configuration of lots.
Let me turn it around so I can show you the lot.
I mean, in the actual world, how do you maintain that in terms of one person's use of what's perceived to be the yard and what isn't.
Yeah.
Either we can grant easements back and forth. It'll depend on the owners in terms of how they wish to structure it, but you can easily grant easements back and forth to be able to make sure that, you know, the second lot is granted the rights of the use of that front.
Easements are never easy, you know, in many ways. You know, they end up being complicated in the future, particularly the kind of nature of that one. You know, was it 10 feet, 8 feet? How much is that?
Oh, I left 15 feet. Plus, they have a 20-foot easement on the other side, so they have 35 feet. You know, that's the thing you have to remember, that they do have the rights to be able to utilize the 20 feet on the other side. They do have an easement. They have a right-of-way easement associated with that. So that was part of what, when you're looking at it, there is a 20-foot easement that is here for the benefit of this lot, located along the property line. At one point in time, it was actually set up as a potential subdivision, but unfortunately, the zoning was changed, so there's no way, you know, none of the houses would be in conformance. You'd have to try and get variances for all of them, and once again, it's a self-imposed hardship.
So if you were to do a hammerhead in that cul-de-sac, I'm trying to understand how the front house is accessed in term, and then how is the back lot? Front lot and house, and how is the back lot accessed?
This lot here?
Right.
Right down the strip.
So the easement is, to get to the back lot is you're crossing over the land that's owned by the front lot, but it's an easement to pass over that?
No, you come off of the cul-de-sac and you have some frontage, but it's wider than you think, because you do have the ability to be able to utilize that 20-foot easement on the adjacent lot.
So is the dimension between those two, between the lot line and the lots to the north, and that first hard line, is that 20 feet clear?
No, I believe that's 15 feet.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And it was partly, you know, I have to admit to you, it was partly
Your expense
because
is less.
I took this triangle out to avoid the 100-foot buffer from the road. So when I took that out, I had to add a little bit more, and I just crowded it over.
Yeah. I'm just graphically not understanding where the bounds of the easement are, but I know it's the north lot line, I know that.
Yeah, there's a 20-foot easement on the adjacent lot.
Oh, the easement goes over the property to the north?
That's correct.
That dotted line?
That's
So what
right,
you're
yes.
doing
So
is
it's
you're
actually, that's right,
Wow.
yes.
So that easement travels over 3 parcels to get
That's
to the
correct.
back lot?
Yes, that's correct.
And that's it's not a right-of-way, it's an easement?
It's an easement. Yeah. It was kind of
And do we have the
unfortunate.
legal documentation for that easement?
Yeah, I can bring you the plans, yeah, show that.
So it's kind of like a shared driveway.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it is right now.
So the parcels to the north would own to the center line of that easement, and they would be able to pass over it equally as the person who's in the back.
That's correct.
So you have 3 parcels without frontage on a sort of a passageway, all able to use it.
If you look at the irony of this little area, look at back lane. I believe there are 3 houses accessing the back lane. It's 10 feet wide. This common drive, there are 2 houses accessing it. It's 12 feet wide. We might only have 1 house with 17 feet wide.
So how does the fire department get back in there?
Just go back through the driveway.
So what next?
Interesting.
Well, obviously, John's not here, so...
Yeah, so, I mean, you've got John's memo.
Yeah, I do have John's memo.
Address some issues there.
And in the interim, I can
You
actually
got a feel
develop a
for-
profile of Cushing
Yeah.
Street to be able to demonstrate to you the site distance at the entrance.
Right.
We need the easement.
Yeah.
All right. I'll bring you the research on the easement.
Okay. It's getting a little late here. I know we definitely owe Mr. Marchand some time tonight, so let's move on. Do you have any other questions for us, anything?
No, I do not. hopefully,
See you back
Do you
here.
want to talk about when we're going to continue them to?
We did it.
This is February 24th. Well, we can street Chessia for the cell tower on the 24th, and
Yeah, the
ZBA
ZBA has another agenda item on the 24th at 8:30, right? So they're going to be stopping that meeting at 8:30.
They have one scheduled at 8 even now, I'm not sure.
They do, all right, so,
They may run over, but,
okay, so why don't we say,
so we could set the time in the future, just right now, say the 24th,
yeah, let's do that.
if that's
Possibly 8 or
comfortable.
8:30.
all right,
And then
24th?
within the next week, it should become more clear.
all right. Yeah, and like I said, I can develop a little bit more information, especially at the entrance to be able to demonstrate the site distance. All right?
Thank you.
Which I thought was the big question that John had.
Well, all of John's questions are big for us, I think. So
He's a power broker when it comes to that.
thanks for coming in.
So is Mr. Marchand? Mr. Marchand? I know we owe you some, you've been continued in past, so my apologies for not getting to it. So. All right. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Want to just talk about what you want to do a little bit here?
Do we have enough?
My name is John Marchand. I'm a resident of Hingham. Been living here for 10 years. Got 11 Crooked Meadow under ownership. Looking to do a subdivision on that property. There's 4 houses on Crooked Meadow. This would be the 5th property. There's approximately 15.8 acres.
Did you say you have it under ownership or under option?
Under option, I checked that, I apologize. The orange line shows the perimeter of the property. The yellow highlighted area shows what is shown as a wetland area on page 1. Second page shows a preliminary draft of the subdivision. It's being done initially as a limited residential road. It would have a variance for the length of the road. Looking to do it under a limited residential, just for a minimum impact versus a minor road.
How long would it be?
About 940 feet.
And it's at 800 feet that is allowed, I think?
What is the right-of-way width on that?
40
40.
versus 46 feet for a minor. The road itself is 20 feet versus 18 by requirement.
I see.
One of the reasons looking to do it, if you look at page 4, there is a slight area that is touched by setback for wetlands. We can move the road so it just would avoid that. Obviously, we could move the whole area. But trying to do it as a, with a 40-foot berm width versus 46 helps protect any encroachment. Page 3 shows the original plan for Crooked Meadow and the proposal of a projection of future way. This road would be along exactly where that proposal of a future way shows on the original subdivision plan.
So this is one house there now
There's one large house in the back of the property today.
on the 15 acres.
Correct.
I mean, one thing I'd just say off the top, it's rare for us to give a waiver on a 140-foot extra feet on a cul-de-sac. That's a lot. 800 is what's allowed, I think.
Yes.
And 140 extra feet's a lot for us, so.
Trying to get the acreage necessary, for the lots is trying to get the lots in. The other way to go is the minor road, which would require 46 feet, another 2 feet of road. I mean, we certainly can propose it that way. It's one of the reasons I'd like, to present, was looking to get some time in front of the board to get their thoughts on it.
How is the current house accessed? Is there
This is just a long driveway.
a driveway off Crooked Meadow?
That's correct.
What, if any, other waivers would you need besides the road?
Right now, depending on which way we go, if we go with limited, it would just be the length of the road. The way it lays out now would be, the road would be 2 feet narrower. Again, we'd want to work with Concom and, try to minimize the impact and, looking for the input of the board and then Concom to, recommendations.
So the remainder of the land that's not the 6 lots, would
It's about
that,
8 acres.
would that be open space? What would be that remaining land?
It would be open space, it would be, potential to be converted back to the town. There's some stormwater management in that area, so it'd have to, final plans would have to be drafted and approved for that.
So you tear down the large house?
That's correct.
How old is the large house?
10 years old, I believe.
10 years old. Wow.
Is that new, huh?
Was there a fire in that house in the recent history?
I believe so. I'm not very
Yes.
overly familiar with the,
Yeah.
Any other questions or input?
But I think the roadway is the issue, right?
Yeah.
So,
again, was kind of looking for guidance from the
Right.
planning board on,
Have we had cases where we've
You can't
waived?
really speak specifically about, you can speak in general about what you've done in the past, but this will
Yeah.
come before you theoretically, so you
Right.
have to speak in general terms
In
on
the
this.
past, have we?
I know we've said no.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I
We-
don't remember ever saying yes.
we haven't given a lot of waivers on roadway dimensions. I've been on the board since 2006, and I don't remember any dimensional waivers to roadway
Okay.
construction. So I think that's probably an indication of
Yep.
that. I also haven't seen a cul-de-sac off of a cul-de-sac, in this way, so I think we'd have to talk to our engineer a little bit directly about how this works from a public safety standpoint, and from, what the right dimensional requirements.
yeah, the road would tie in right before the cul-de-sac.
Yeah,
Right before the turnaround of the cul-de-sac.
right.
In the area on the site where this corner, there's an existing house there,
Correct,
but there's land that's not wetlands on this side.
correct.
And I'm just curious as to why that isn't a lot, and thereby your proposed extension of your roadway isn't shorter. In other words, if you could
I think there's a
do
configuration
by right.
issue.
There's what, configuration of the lot? In terms of wetlands or incursion into wetlands or?
The lines, property lines, the lot can only be so many variances of the lines.
I see. So you're talking about the overlay of the circle within the profile of the lot?
Yeah.
Configuration. Anyway, okay.
Susan, did you want to add something? I saw you got a motion there.
Oh, no, I was just wondering if the board knew what the current condition and width of Crooked Meadow is, if it's going to be extended.
Right,
Yeah.
because that's like Lily Pond Lane. Is it Lily Pond
Lily
Lane
Pond
where
Lane,
they,
that's
where
off
they
of
keep
the-
coming back? And the existing roadway doesn't meet, in this other case, where the existing roadway doesn't meet the town's, the roadway requirements, then there's no possibility of adding to that roadway.
Okay.
So that would definitely be a question that we would be asking, and all of this is, there wouldn't be a possibility of putting a new roadway that meets all the requirements off of a road that doesn't meet
Okay.
those, so I don't know. what-
So I'll have to look into that.
Right, right.
Understand.
All right, so we gave you some preliminary input as you requested.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's helpful to you.
It is, and I appreciate it.
Wish you luck going forward.
Thank you.
All right.
Good luck, thanks for coming in.
Murphy is, okay, come on up. So we discussed this issue at our last meeting. an absentia, I guess, because you weren't there. But we got your request that you wanted to come in and be heard, so obviously we want to hear from you, so let us know what your position is.
My name's Brian Murphy. I represent the ownership for Viking Lane. I appreciate you seeing me tonight, this late hour. I guess I wasn't here at the last meeting, and I just wanted to, I guess, let you know what our position is as far as how we understood where the subdivision was and is. It goes back to 2012, when I think when the last time the subdivision was brought up before the planning board in any significant manner. The result of it was just a letter that it was talking about extending the time to complete the subdivision. And Katie Lacey addressed this to my dad, Mr. Murphy, saying that the extension had expired on September 1st, 2011. And so we were under the impression at that point, the subdivision had already expired. However, she goes on to say that the board members reviewed the condition assessment report. That's the report from Nick Laney, who was a review engineer at the time, and agreed that a certificate of action granting the request for an extension would be granted as soon as the board receives notification from Mr. Laney that such improvements have been completed. So that year, 2012, we went out and did all of the work that that Mr. Laney had asked us to do, and I had him out there to review. And I guess where kind of the disconnect happened was that he actually came out and reviewed, but never got back to the board. The only thing that was left to do was, I think, a trash rack or something along those lines, trash racks that I had to chase my contractor down to get. But we were still just kind of under the impression that the subdivision was going to continue on, just based off of Ms. Lacey's letter. So I guess in December, just to backtrack to 2013 a little bit, obviously we've got more interest in the property as the market's recovered. So we decided that 2014 we'd like to really start moving in earnest in this subdivision, whether it's selling or building ourselves. So that's where I contacted Mary, and it just said that we'd like to come in and just formally get the extension. And that's when I got notified that we may not get the extension and that it's expired, and it expired as of September of 2013, which was a little surprising. I just thought it was expired. So anyways, I kind of brought us to that meeting a couple of weeks ago where the board voted that you wanted a revision of subdivision. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there, but I just wanted to just kind of state our case as far as where we are. Obviously, the subdivision, the road is significantly complete, along with drainage and everything else. I think we've done a fairly good job of upkeeping the property. We've mowed the berms. We have maintained, the drainage ever since, that report. Everything, I think, looks good down there. We had issues with kids going back there years ago, and we blocked off the road. No more problems. I think we've been pretty good stewards of the property while it's sat the way it has. And so I do ask that you really consider giving us an extension. And there's just one more point, and that's I was looking at the approved endorsed subdivision today, and I really always just assumed that the dates that either Katie or Mary had given us those were the dates, and we had taken it as face value. And I was looking at it, and I saw that the date of the approval is sometime, let's just say June of 2002. My understanding is there's 8 years that you have for subdivision approval. That's.
I think you'd go by the filing date.
It was approved June 8th of 2000, subject to covenant conditions set forth in a covenant executed by William J. Murphy, trustee.
So
It
then,
was approved June 8, 2002, right, according to the plan, or am I misreading it?
June 8, 2000, right here.
Oh, yeah.
Right there.
so if it was approved June 8, 2000, with, you know, with the 4 years and all these extensions, that would take you up till about 2012, and then you go to September 1st, 2013. And I've looked this up when you initially contacted Mary, and, you know, my understanding of the law is, as a matter of law, once the permit expires, the applicant must refile. Now, I don't know what my colleagues feel like, but if you came in September or early October and you present us with an extenuating circumstance, might have given you some grace, but it's been a while. I don't know how other people feel about it. I mean, it's great to hear you guys, you're going and you're motivated and you're going to get going on this project, but it has been quite a long time. And the law says that, in principle, the law says that once it expires, it expires.
Obviously, I'm not an attorney, so I can't, speak to that. But I will say, that for many of those years that this subdivision has been around, there has been some tough markets. And, we've waited. We've kept the road in good shape. We've kept the area in good shape. We've asked we've done what has been asked of us, and it would, to have us go back and to do a revision is obviously asking for us to go through some steps that, the subdivision is ready, and we'll be obviously creating more administrative, work for you all, and I don't know if it's necessary for a subdivision that's substantially complete.
Would you agree with my interpretation of the law, Susan?
No, I don't. So, the board historically, and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, if people came in within that month, like you had said, September, and said, yeah, okay, we'll do it, because sometimes the hearings don't come in, or they kind of lose track of the date, and they're a few weeks off, and they get reminded. I mean, the board has been saying, okay, effective as of the date expired, we'll give you whatever more time. I mean, the case law is clear that if it lapses, it lapses. I mean, whether or not the 8-year freeze, zoning freeze, it's really a zoning freeze for a subdivision plan. So, but the zoning hasn't changed as far as use, land use, or dimensional requirements or anything. So that it doesn't really change the facts here too much. From the board's perspective, and I don't know if there's anything relevant here, is if the rules and regulations have changed and the permit's lapsed, then they are subject to, unless they have an extension of the old permit, then they're subject to compliance with the existing rules and regs. So what it does is present the opportunity that if there's a lot that's changed, and you have a subdivision that's approved 10 plus years ago, it gives you a chance to look at it. At the same time, if they come in for new subdivision approval, and John Chessie or whoever goes out there and does everything, and it's a short list to really make it in good shape, then it's a really short review and easy, approval for the board. But I guess the question comes, at what point, you're going on 5+ months, do you create a precedent of granting technically, to give
That
them a
would be
little
my
grace period,
question.
you know what I mean? You're kind of starting to set a precedent where you're kind of little wiggle room grace period, it starts growing, and I
Like,
guess
I would
that's a
ask
question for
Mr.
the board.
Marchand, like, so where should we draw, not Mr. Marchand, he's gone. With Mr. Murphy, at what point should we say, no, you have to reapply? Like, if we don't use the expiration date as the cutoff, or a couple of months after the expiration date, how do we decide when it actually does expire or not if we don't use the expiration date?
Well, I'm not really sure the answer to that, but I can, say that we certainly completed all the work that was asked of us. And, I think with changes in people, and including, Mary's fairly new to this project, and Nick Laney doesn't do the review anymore. There were a lot of, obviously, there was some disconnect that we just didn't get, everything sent to the board, because I think if things got sent to the board saying, we had done what we've been asked to do, the board probably would have voted at that time, and we wouldn't be here where we are. I think that's, our extenuating circumstances that, we just, there was a crossing the paths here that we just didn't get I get the I's dotted and the T's crossed.
One of the questions that I've had looking at the history, and I'm looking at the timeline, and I remember sitting on a number of hearings where, 2011, 2009, where, there was a request for an extension then. And the concern I had on it is that the engineering reports and the condition of the road, right now, what was completed was the sub-base, if I'm not mistaken, the base course. And that was completed in 2006. And so basically the roadway has been there for 8 years. And even though you've been cutting the shoulders and all, I also understood that there were some issues in the roadway. There were some issues with some of the storm drainage. There were issues of the roadway starting to deteriorate based on the fact that it had not been completed relative to top course and other pieces. And I also was of the understanding that we were looking for a sort of a report that would say that all of Nick's original inspection issues in 2012 were completed. I'm not sure that I've seen anything on that. So I guess my sense is that it seems to me that so much time has gone by that it's in the best interest of the town to basically refile it. I mean, I understand there are extenuating circumstances relative to the market, but on the other hand, the roadway is in a certain condition that isn't really where it was in 2006, and, we're going to have to go backwards to go forwards.
Well, you will have to go backwards to go forwards, but Mr. Laney, I just want to say, did let us know that the drainage improvements had been completed, but that the other improvements that he felt would happen when the top course of pavement would be put down were not, if I'm correct. And he did send me an email today and said that, in his opinion, those improvements, such as they have been made, were all made before September, the expiration date. There's still work that needs to be done with the top course, and that doesn't address your condition concerns, which will be there whether, whichever route the planning board decides to go,
Right.
those issues are there.
Because the substrate, the top course is only as good as the integrity of the substrate or the base course.
But I did want to put that on the record. Mr. Laney did tell me that work had been done.
So Mary, can you explain a little bit the refiling versus or just moving forward with this? What is the risk to the project if we just continue with this, and what is the risk to the applicant if we ask for a new application?
Sure. Without looking, I haven't reviewed the in-depth plans. However, if the planning board were to grant an extension at this point in time, you have the precedent discussion, but putting that aside, the planning board would need to either get an updated cost to complete or secure additional bond money, because we have insufficient money. We'd also need additional peer review funds. And then my suspicion is that the board would want to have some kind of review of the current information. The last condition survey that we have was dated January 2012, and then there was another walkthrough after that, but I didn't get an updated report. I just got an informal memo. So that process would need to go through, and once the board was satisfied, I suspect that the applicant would then be asking for a release of lots and permits. So that would be one avenue. The other avenue, going through the revision of subdivision process, the applicant theoretically has the plans prepared, right? So that would be a printing cost, a filing cost, it would be duly noticed public hearing. However, I believe that the Board of Health approval process, if the applicant were subject to that now, he may decrease a lot in his density. So the planning board regulations may not have changed such that you would effectively say, no, you can't get this number of lots, but the related regulations have changed, and that may put a burden on the applicant with regard to losing a lot and
So it sounds to me like an extension puts the burden on the town and the board, and a refiling puts the burden on the applicant.
What's the burden on the town of the extension?
Well, it's all the due diligence that we have to do to review all the current reports and...
But the applicant would pay for the...
No, I understand that, but it's a lot of review time and it's a lot of time on our part.
But the same as a new application, right?
Right, we do that with
Just in reflection of this, project over the years, drainage is a big issue on this project, and therefore I think a lot of time has passed, and I think, the engineer serves as an advisor to us, not a decision maker. And never in the town has an engineer made decisions for us. So whether Nick Laney says things are okay, we look at that report and review it and decide if that's okay to us. And I think the fact that we never said that, and I think that it's 6 months hence, and I think that this is a long project, and drainage is an issue on this project, I think it needs to be refiled.
You know what, the Board of Health, if septic systems are going to have to be approved for each of the lots, they're going to get approved under current Title V. When they actually apply for the system, they're going to have to apply under the current regs. So if there's a potential to lose a lot, there's a potential to lose a lot.
No matter what.
And we'll do the same review, regardless of which way you go on the community planning department and peer review team. Will do essentially the same type of work. It will just be labeled a different type process.
On the precedent side, if there was, and I don't know, I'm assuming this was the vote in January.
It looks like it expired once before. Am I reading that correctly?
No, because the Permit Extension Act kicked things out.
Okay, so he didn't really need to come in and request an extension.
No, because it was automatic by operation of law.
So we didn't really waive it.
Right. So, you have the question of, in January 2012, if Nick said what he was supposed to say, then they can get an extension. The question becomes, who was the onus on there to follow up? Someone might argue the applicant, it's really onus on them, but to make sure that the information came in. If the information came in, I'm saying if the board said, okay, you're looking for a reason why an extension after 5 months could be justified. If you say, the information did come in, and for whatever reason, there was miscommunication, and if we had it, then the extension would have been granted. You could create the facts in the certificate of action to decrease its use by others as a precedent. To say, no, we were waiting for information, it turns out it did come in, there was If you chose to go there, I think there's a way to do it. I do think things lapse, they lapse. That's the way it is. If you have a liquor license and it lapses, you have to apply for a new one, you don't get it, you can't still serving liquor. So, there's a reason why things lapse, but, extensions get granted, and the board has to decide what you feel comfortable
But
with.
it seems to me that the issue of the lapse and the issue of the paperwork is one thing, but what kind of stands out to me is the project has lapsed since 2006 for whatever reason, but right now the condition of the infrastructure on that project is not up to standard, and so I think that it puts in a reasonable burden on the town to say, okay, we're going to accept this, and we can rationalize the dates and the calendar, but it seems to me the bigger issue is the condition.
You wouldn't release any lots unless if you say,
You still have to get the peer engineer.
let's say for the sake of argument, you gave him an extension. Conditions of the extension would be you have to pay so much money into a peer review fund, there's going to be a new cost to complete, you're going to have to, they have, I don't know, do you have just a covenant right now on the lots, or is it a fund, or is it
I believe
a bond?
But Nick wants it increased because the bond is down to...
No, is that the bond, or is that the?
Well, it's both, right? The bond...
The review account is only $800.
Right, but the bond is supposed to be increased to 1.5.
Okay, so it's a bond. So, it becomes the issue, are there lots that still need to be released?
Well, no lots have been released.
So no lots. So the thing is, you have all these conditions that can be tied to lot releases, that until the road is brought to a certain standard, you're not going to
All right, I think
My only concern is the precedent.
If I may, the applicant did also, I believe that he felt that Mr. Lanning had forwarded the report sooner than it really got forwarded. And perhaps it got forwarded to the planner when the planner was gone, and I don't know that for certain. So, there was kind of a gap there. But Ms. Murphy is correct that, the town really does hold all the cards because you hold all the lots and you hold all the power with regard to getting the condition up to snuff.
All right, so let's we've been talking about it for 20 minutes here. So who's in favor of granting the extension?
I think that because the work was actually done before the permit expired, and because Mr. Laney says that he knew that it was done but just didn't communicate that to us, that we should consider the extension. My fear is that the only other permit that I know of that expired once was one on the harbor, and we did not extend it. So my concern is the precedent on permit extending this amount of time ahead of time. But repeating myself, I think that the substantial work had been done, and the town engineer knew that it had been done. So,
anybody else in favor of extending the permit?
I kind of think there are some extenuating circumstances here. It looks like there might have been some miscommunication. So I don't know the history of the harbor project that Judy's referencing, or whether there are any issues like this, but it strikes me that...
It wasn't a subdivision.
It wasn't a
It
subdivision.
was a special permit.
Yeah.
So I would be inclined to vote in favor of granting it.
That's two. Anyone else? Okay. Those against? Aye.
Aye.
All right, so we have a couple more items. I think we should table the other items. It's past 10 o'clock.
What are they?
The other items involved...
Thanks for coming in.
So I think a working group update, DLTA grant discussion, FY15 budget update, and the minutes. I think we should move them all to the next meeting. It's pretty late.
Yeah.
And anything pressing, Mary, that you need us to speak about before we adjourn?
Just one question, Judy, on the South Hingham.
Hold on. Anything pressing, Mary, you want us to talk
Nothing
about?
pressing at this hour.
Want to just continue South Hingham?
Yeah, I just assume continue it, but are the minutes from the last 2-3 meetings on
They haven't been
the website?
voted on. They're not on the website. I can send you the draft, but they're not voted on.
Just
They
curious
will.
as to the discussion.
We're having our next,
and the
well, you
issues.
saw the newspaper article, right? There's been 2 newspaper articles, and I spoke, and Paul.
No, I saw that, I just didn't see
Okay,
a
so
lot of
that
specifics in that.
is, what you see in the
Okay.
newspaper is the substance of what the conversation was. There was an article after the first one, and an article after the second one. We hope to put an article in the paper after every one, because we really want people's involvement. At this next one coming up on February 18th, we will vote the minutes of the last two, and they will get posted.
That's okay.
Could you send a draft of
Susan
them?
might do one.
Well, I mean, really, you can't wait till February.
So when he comes
If you
back.
really, if you're desperate for it, I would send it to you.
Did you sign your affidavit?
But they'll be there.
You give it to me, it's American.
Yes, please.
Put it in here. Gary, you want to sign yours? Or you want to wait?
I looked at the TV broadcast, but I haven't looked at the tape.
Crooked Meadow Lane
Meadow Lane, yes.
was approved for an extension up to the 800 feet when I was still on the stand. There's an initial section of Crooked Meadow Lane, the line was narrower than the right of way required. And so there was a condition